All right, so we are starting a stream. Welcome to Humane Mind Live, episode 101, Communist Manifesto. Oh, this is too dumb. All right, terrible. So this is the second episode we're doing on the Communist Manifesto. Before we get to that, I do have a couple of stories throughout from the week. So, without further ado, I guess. Here's the first one. So, so this is a great video, but it's a reference to something else. So ABC this week released a video footage that they said was the travesty in Syria and Turkey, just devastation and bombing and stuff like that. Turns out the actual video footage was from a firing range in Tennessee. So, not Turkey, not Syria, but in the United States, where it was a demonstration of guns. It wasn't they weren't killing people and blowing up buildings. They were showing off a gun's destructive power on a test range. And ABC tried to pass that off as a devastating attack. Like, this is what Trump did. He pulled out his troops, and this is what's going on. And then people called him on it right away, like within minutes.
Well, so from what I understand about the shooting range thing is it's an annual event where for that one day you can legally, the ones who do own automatic weapons, heavy duty machine guns.
Mm-hmm.
This is where they show them off to the public, and they put automobiels and appliances.
Oh yeah,
and
these are things that happen on like where they've got the mounted guns, like the Gatling guns, and they let other people go up there and shoot them, obviously under supervision. They've also got like grenade launchers and stuff like that you wouldn't be able to shoot under normal circumstances. I've seen them fire off like anti-aircraft guns at these, flamethrowers. I've seen at some of these demonstrations. It's cool stuff. Like, you can't go to a regular firing range on your own and fire some of these weapons. So this is kind of like, yeah.
The clip ABC had looks like it was at night, and you could see all the yellow traces behind the bullets.
Yeah.
It looked like a war movie or something, and explosions everywhere. So the only thing I'm not sure of was it just incompetence? Why did they think that came from Syria at all, or were they trying to push a story? And because of the internet, they are now getting fact checked instantly.
Yeah, no, this is yeah. It's like, this is stuff that this is what I said on it. I think Cernovich commented on it. I'm like, dude, they've been doing this kind of stuff for years, and they're just now getting called on it in real time. Because
look it up instantly.
Yeah, normally something like this, it would go on the news, and people wouldn't start fact checking. You wouldn't hear about the actual story months later, and then they'd print the retraction. Now it's not months later; it's the next day or the same day that it's released. That people are like, dude, you guys are. So, like, a big one of this was, like, I've talked about this before, is that CNN clip where they took the 5 seconds of the victim's sister talking about, hey, we shouldn't burn down our city. And then if you go anywhere before that or anywhere after that, she's talking about causing more crime, just not in their neighborhood, in other neighborhoods. Go take their stuff, go burn down their stuff. And it's like, how did CNN magically come across the one section where she sounds sensible in this 5-minute tangent? And that wasn't found out. I think that people started calling on them about that for like a week after, because they'd gotten the full clip. Now we're getting to the point where people are like, no, you got to catch them on this every time, every second that they do this, because they do this constantly.
Yeah, I mean, same thing with the Covington kids.
Yeah.
They had the whole video. They chopped off the one bit to make the kid look like he was opposing a Native American guy.
Yeah. They chop up a section of the clip, and then they spin their narrative, and then other people are like, dude, what are you guys are manipulating all of this. And this is another example of that. They take a video clip, and they're like, oh, nope, nobody's going to notice that, this is not what we're talking about. And they pass it off as if it is legitimate.
So. I'm still going to call it a GIF instead of a GIF.
Yeah, it's easier to say.
Turkeys is awesome.
Yeah. For me, I've always said GIF, but wait, yeah.
I think GIF is the correct pronunciation according to the guy.
Yeah, GIF is the correct pronunciation.
I've been calling it a GIF for decades, so it's hard to.
Yeah, I had never heard. Yeah, I say yeah. I say GIF if I'm not thinking about it. If I think about it for a second, I'll start to switch in and start saying GIF because choosy moms choose GIF. That's right. That was the catchphrase for the peanut butter. So when he's the guy who created this format said choosy coders choose GIF. Anyway. That's the slang and how you remember the exact pronunciation of it. Although GIF makes more sense if you've seen it for the first time. Anyway, so the next clip here, or the next, I guess not clip, the next thing in the news. Oh, what the heck? Like, I know Pharrell Williams is out there with some of his fashion choices and just as a person, but this is just nonsense. This is GQ magazine. What is that? And the new masculinity issue. The dude's wearing a dress made out of bed sheets. Or I think Jared, not gay Jared, formerly from Crowder Show, said that this was a sleeping bag. He's like, oh, that's why he was wearing the smoky hat. He's going around stealing campers' sleeping bags.
Arby's bought that hat. I'm pretty sure it got auctioned off and Arby's bought it because that's their logo. It's a
giant hat. So, Apologist Watson has it, the new masculinity. So this is my contribution. It's just a marketing scheme to sell more masculinity classic in a few months.
But what does new masculinity mean? Is that a clothing line?
I don't know, but
this looks like banana-colored puffy coats that all got stitched together, like 5 or 6 of them.
Oh, you didn't catch the joke? What? It's a marketing ploy, because they're planning on selling Masculinity Classic in a few months.
What's Masculinity Classic?
New Coke? Come on, man.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm not a Coke drinker.
Okay, so, back in the, 70s or 80s, Coca-Cola brought out a new version of their product called New Coke that was a little bit sweeter to try to compete with Pepsi. People hated it. And then a couple of months later, I think it was like 3 or 4 months later, they started putting regular Coke back on the shelves and just calling it Coca-Cola Classic. And then for some reason, their sales started to skyrocket again. And it's like, what? Because the reason they introduced New Coke was because sales were dropping.
They were complaining that it wasn't as good as Pepsi, that Pepsi was sweeter, and so... Yeah.
So that's what I was like.
Sales really dropped, brought it back, and then
that's what's gonna happen here. Is like people are like, dude, this is not masculinity. That's what you. I don't know what this is supposed to be. But,
masculinity has nothing to do with clothing styles at all.
Yeah. And whatever these people are pushing as far as new masculinity, women don't like it, and they're gonna like, we demand our classic men. So
okay, now I get it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just. So this one I found. I don't know who this guy is, but this one I found kind of out of the blue, and this is just not really political, but pretty funny. So the caption here is: "You think it's cool to get high? Think again." Guys, I feel passionate about this PSA. Please watch and share. Thanks. So.
All right, pop quiz. You think it's cool to get high? Think again. We see it every week. Your favorite tight end's got the ball. He's headed upfield, and then he gets high above the turf, only to get caught in midair and blam, slam back down to earth. They get tackled.
Looks like he just took an elbow in the nuts.
Even worse, the drive can end up dead. It's not cool. And if your friends tell you to get high, then guess what? They're not your friends. You see, the tacklers have been being cool. They're going to school. And they know it's coming. But I know this. In life, you can't just leap over your problems. You gotta confront them. Choosing to get high is choosing for that play to end. And believe me, that end, it's not tight.
It's not tight.
I was like, dude, that was great. So the clip goes on a little bit longer, but that's them talking about it in whatever show he's on. I don't know if it's on SportsCenter or what, but I found that in my timeline. I was like, dude, that is amazing. So that was pretty funny. I'm not even a big football fan or anything, but that PSA was brilliant.
Think it's okay to get high.
Yeah, and it's just, yeah, I don't think that jumping has ever helped anybody.
Uh,
I mean,
every once in a while there'll be an amazing play where they can actually get over.
but it's kind of like a 1 in 20 or something like that, and you're like, yeah.
Yeah, usually it just ends up with them getting pummeled and slammed to the ground.
And most of those video clips, it wasn't just him getting knocked out of the air. It was like him losing complete control of the ball, and it ends up with an interception or a fumble. You're like, yeah, that's just asking for it. All right, so that was a pretty interesting clip, but here's the major thing that was going on this week. There's nothing really major going on other than there's a couple of stories, but nothing to really significant happening this week. Outside of this, because this involves Trump, and for some reason news cycle is always about Trump. So this is Yashir Ali, sorry, not Ari, Ali talking about this. So I'm not sure if I guess he is left wing, but sometimes this guy posts stuff and I'm like, oh dude, that's on point, and other times he has these out there takes. Like this whole thread is kind of out there. Although, mostly it's him describing the situation, so I don't know if these are actually his takes or if this is what he's saying other people are talking about. But so, a video depicting a macabre scene of a fake President Trump shooting, stabbing, and brutally assaulting members of the news media and his political opponents was shown at a conference for his supporters in a Miami resort. Now, that sounds terrible. That description of it.
Yeah.
And see, I think later on he says, so before I show the actual clip, he says the White House weighs in on it. And so their official response was, Donald Trump hasn't seen the video. He will see it shortly, but based upon everything he's heard, he strongly condemns this video. I'm like, yeah, obviously he got that explanation from you at the beginning where it's like, oh, it's macabre, and here's the actual video clip. So,
from his mother's arms, and
alright, let's start from the beginning here. Oh, loading. And it doesn't take a rocket surgeon, a rocket scientist.
and throw in a cage full of pedophiles, and let them
I
have.
tried to restart it and it just started right from the middle again. Or, I guess not the middle. Like, a few seconds of watching it, like, oh, that's the scene from Kingsman. That was awesome. You're like, all it is the scene from Kingsman, and Trump's head is pasted over Colin Firth, and then it's just got a bunch of logos over the other random churchgoers' faces. And then it's got a couple of headshots of, like, news pundits and political people. And I'm like, wait, oh, this is a macabre scene of Trump killing people. I'm like, it's a meme. What?
Well, then, if that is a horrible scene that should not be put out, why was nobody commenting on the movie itself? Because it's obviously cheesy. Trump's face looks like poster billboarded, 2D, just they got a couple of different angles of him making faces and pasted it on. It's like a mix of South Park trying to...
And other people were commenting on this, like, what's your name? Kathy Griffin was... Which one? Is that the redhead, Kathy Griffin?
Yeah, she's the one that had the severed Trump head.
Yeah, she was saying, oh, I got condemned for holding the severed head. Trump fans aren't looking at, like, this is a joke. And I'm like, yes, because people literally think there are people walking around whose face is the CNN logo. And then Trump's going to literally stab this CNN person in the face.
Well, it's not about literally, it's about the intent of the message. Her message was...
He thinks he's going to actually go and kill an entire organization?
It's about Trump owning the media.
That any sensible person would look at it and be like, yeah, he's just destroying all the people that are attacking him. Okay, that
It fits as a satirical message.
yeah.
All I do is win, 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 no matter what and everything.
But he didn't make this video.
He didn't make this
And
video.
from
Somebody
my
made it about him.
From my understanding, this video came out last year. It's like
Yeah,
from
it's over a year old. It's
Oh.
making the news rounds this week
But
because it was played at one of his resorts for a pro-Trump,
No, it wasn't.
not rally, but a meeting or something along those
it
lines.
wasn't. That's all. That's all a lie as well.
Really?
They had a pro-Trump event, and Huckabee Sanders was there, and I think Trump Jr. was there. But this was in between sessions. It was not an authorized distribution or video. It was a couple of people, and some dude said, "Hey, you guys want to see a video?" They went to a side conference room, and so they watched the video. It had nothing to do with the conference at all. It was not an authorized video. They had no idea it was getting played. It has nothing to do with the event. It was some dudes in a side room that said, "You guys want to see a funny video?" and invited a few people in to go watch it on someone's laptop. That's the official story. That's why Trump has no idea about it. It's why the White House is like, never heard of it. If the New York
Okay.
Times had not published a story about it, that video would have still gone on relatively unknown.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't
So-
have a problem with it. I mean, if you've seen Kingsman, like I thought Kingsman was a great movie.
Now, so I can see
So I've got no problem with that.
put that out from a presidential platform. This came from the White House. I could see people saying, you know what, that's not. Some of your memes are funny, and some of the tweets, they're not. But the president putting out videos of a bunch of people dying, I could see why that would offend a lot of people. Fine. But if you just watch this and know that it's some person on YouTube making a silly meme, and that it's not even related to this Trump event, some guys were watching in the side room just because they were bored in between sessions. That has nothing to do with Trump, nothing to do with the White House,
Yeah.
and it's just a stupid meme video about Trump owning the media that's constantly attacking him.
Yeah. Well, and there is the idea that he's going to destroy them, or because these are organizations, they're not people. Like if you can't shoot PBS, you can't shoot CNBC, like you can't, like what you can't literally take a pistol and shoot ABC. Like what kind of nonsense is that? You can have ABC get like, hey, you put them out of business. They no longer exist as an organization. That can happen.
Yep.
You can't like launch a nuke at a company and kill the company. Because it's like that. It doesn't. It sounds like the insanity people are expect. Like, oh, this is encouraging Trump to go and kill his competitor. I'm like, that's not
like
how this
saying
works.
Arnold Schwarzenegger has encouraged violence around the planet because of movies like Commando.
Yeah,
It's a clip. That's from a movie. That movie came out years ago, like 2014 or something. So,
but the
Watch the
idea
movie.
that this means
amazing. That's one of the best fight. I would put that on par with like a John Wick movie.
yeah,
That was just an amazing fight scene, and you don't expect that from that Colin Firth guy, but
yeah.
seen that movie dozens of times, almost specifically just for that fight scene because it's so awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a joke video, and it was not actually part of the event. That's what New York Times put a spin on it.
Yeah, as usual.
They didn't say it was presented by any of the staffers there. They just said it was displayed at the event.
Yeah.
Which technically that's true.
But
that's
they made it seem like it was, yeah, hey, this is something that they're encouraging. And well, and the stupid thing is they look at this and they're like, oh, that's encouraging violence against people. And I'm like, what? Did you guys... So there was the other viral video of Trump at the, was it WWE, where they put CNN over one of the wrestlers' face and he was, hitting the wrestler with a chair? Yeah. And people are like, oh, he's encouraging violence. And I'm like, what?
He didn't make it.
He didn't make it. And also, it's been 2.5 years. No violence against CNN. So, what's the problem? I thought the whole fear was, oh, they're encouraging violence and Trump supporters are going to attack CNN. And
The big difference is
nothing.
If you watched, say, The Roadrunner,
yeah,
and you're saying that's encouraging violence against animals because the Wile E. Coyote's constantly getting blown up, thrown off cliffs, he's trying to catch his dinner, but it's all backfiring and that's violence. Or Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny, right?
Mm-hmm.
Elmer Fudd's condoning violence against nature and against animals. No, it's a cartoon. It's silly. It is meant to be funny entertainment, not to be taken seriously. That's the same thing with this video. But
Yeah,
then when
it's
you look
meant to be a joke. It's not meant to be taken literally or
when you look
seriously, and
at
yet
say,
everybody's take the
Kathy Griffin's picture where she's holding the bloody severed Trump head, I don't understand the joke. Maybe I'm missing it. Maybe I don't have the sense of humor for that. But
yeah.
I'm
Well, I mean,
unaware of what the joke is with that picture. If it's related to Trump having said something about his severed head, then fine, I get it. But I don't.
no,
It was
it's
related
just
on
the
it. It seemed like it was just hatred against Trump,
yeah.
or the Snoop Dogg's video where he's shooting a Trump imposter or lookalike in the face.
Yeah.
I guess you can call that a joke, but it doesn't appear to have been done to bring out laughter or to appeal to a sense of humor. It seems
Well,
like it was done in.
so okay, here's the one of the things that I think is a big difference between the two, because in this clip where from the Kingsman, everybody in there is attacking everyone else and attacking Colin Firth's character, because during that scene everybody is going crazy, like
Yeah.
Colin Firth is just beating everybody because he's better trained. He's a secret agent who goes around. I mean, he does this kind of sort of thing for, I guess, a living. So he takes out everybody. Everybody is attacking everybody else. Meanwhile, in the Snoop Dogg video, it's one-sided. Trump's character is just standing there being a goofy clown, and then Snoop Dogg shoots him. And in Kathy Griffin, Trump isn't attacking her. Like, if everybody wasn't attacking everybody in that scene, then Colin Firth probably wouldn't gone around and killed everybody. But in a lot of the scenes, like, he's getting hit in the back with stuff and then turns around and stabs somebody in the neck. Or somebody is attacking and lunging at him, he takes their weapon and kills him with it. It's like, yeah, there is a lot of self-defense going on in that video. I can understand, like, that's where I'm like, self-defense, and I guess there's aggression because everybody's kind of going aggro in the clip, but it's one thing when everybody it's not one-sided. That's what I saw as a big difference, is these other instances where they're attacking Trump isn't attacking anybody or isn't the big bad guy about the rape. No, he's just standing there minding his own business. They're like, oh, gotta take him out. What?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and just to put stuff in perspective, I'm not saying Kathy Griffith should have been censored or that Snoop Dogg's video should be taken down and they're saying, hey, you're advocating assassinating the president. Obviously, they're not saying someone should go and shoot Trump in the head. He's just showing his disdain for Trump. I get it. Fine. He doesn't like current president or his policy or whatever his impression is of the president. They have the right to go out and put their opinions out. Yeah. Obviously, Kathy Griffin is not saying someone should behead Trump. She's just showing her disdain towards the president. Whatever.
She can do that.
All in the same boat.
Yeah.
So if they're fine releasing that, and you don't hear any conservatives out there saying this should have all been censored, all you hear is them saying, you put this out, so why? What's the difference?
Yeah, so I will double down on that, or I guess not double down, but back you up there. It's like, yeah, I'm not saying either Snoop Dogg or Kathy Griffin, like, I don't care. I don't listen to either of them, and Kathy Griffin hasn't been funny since ever.
Ever. Not my type of comedy, that lady.
Yeah. I don't think she's ever been funny.
Yeah,
I think she's been tolerable in certain things. And Snoop Dogg, he used to be good when it wasn't Snoop Dogg by himself. Like when he was working with other rappers. I mean, back in the 90s, that was classic Snoop Dogg. And then pretty much everything he's done since. Let's see.
I don't know.
Was that a Fantastic Ride? When would Fantastic Ride come out? That was like 92, 93.
That was Coolio.
Fantastic Ride?
Yeah.
That was Snoop Dogg. What?
No, that was Coolio.
No, Coolio. Yeah, I know. No, what? Am I getting? Maybe that was Coolio. Man, Am I being racist right now? No, what was Snoop Dogg's big hit back then? I thought he was working with
He did Gin and Juice.
Gin and Juice. Okay, yeah.
And that was the big one that everybody's covering. But no, that's
Yeah.
Coolio, because I don't really listen to rap, but for some reason I did kind of like the tune on that song.
Man.
Plus Coolio's
Yeah,
got...
that is. Oh, it's Fantastic Voyage, Coolio. Man.
Yeah.
So what did Snoop Dogg come out with at that time? Because I know his stuff was on MTV. Man. It was around that same era, though. What did Snoop Dogg? It's Gin and Juice, but he had other stuff, right? Because I'm trying to think of... Yeah, Gin and Juice.
Oh, Still a G Thing.
Okay. Man.
That one I remember being pretty big. Murder Was the Case. That one was pretty big. And I think that's off the same album.
Yeah, it was that album, but since then he's been kind of...
I mean,
I don't know what it is, but Snoop Dogg has been...
Doggy
he's
Doggy
like
World. Yeah, I remember that one.
He's like a really
I
slow
kind of like
rapper.
the older stuff. But like the Drop It Like It's Hot, I don't really like that song.
Nah.
But that's just personal preference. I mean, that one got pretty
Yeah.
big.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I guess I never really been a fan of Snoop Dogg, so... Okay, I'm looking back and I'm like, even the stuff I think I liked it from him, out of that, Gin and Juice is the only one that I'm like, yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
And mostly I remember that song not because of the original, but because of the cover from Gord, where it's the country version, which is yeah, the bluegrass version of Gin and Juice, and that is amazing. I don't know, like, I don't know what it is, but when you combine country and rap together, it's better than either country or rap could be on their own. There's a couple of songs like that.
I really don't like that. What was that? Nas X. That Old Town Road.
Oh, you don't like Old Town Road?
Mm-mm. Those are my
Oh.
two worst genres: country and rap.
What? I think that works amazing.
That I like, and there are very few country songs I like, but put that together and you just get country drawl about a old town. I don't know. Just the whole narrative and picture it paints. I don't like that kind of country. Never been my preference.
Oh,
So,
no. See,
it's just
I like that. I like Old Town Road. I think that is a great mashup of genres. And let's see, there's also there's a version of Kill a Man by a group called Wrench. That's country version of that. Like, I like the Rage Against the Machine version, but I also like that Wrench version. I think that Wrench version cover, I think, I like better than the Rage version.
Who was that country group? Florida something?
Florida Line?
Yeah, maybe Florida Line and Nelly, and they had that cruise song.
Oh.
Blech. That one either.
That's just a boring song.
Very generic.
Yeah, that's just a very generic song. But there are a lot of country covers, like,
We've kind of gone off on a side tangent.
Yes, gone off on a side tangent, my bad.
Back
But
to the main story.
okay,
I don't care about security stuff against Trump. I'm fine with that. And I really don't care about this other video. I like the movie Kingsman, and I think that's one of the best fight scenes, period, in history. But it's just a joke, and people need to get over it. And I really wish mainstream media would stop lying about stuff.
Yeah.
Trump did not push this out. His administration had nothing to do with it. It's an old video from a year ago, and it was some people watching it in the side room because it was in between sessions and they were bored. Just, if they reported normally, this would have not been a thing at all. In fact, they didn't even need to report it because it had nothing to do with the event.
All right. So, gonna move on to the next topic. But I would love to hear a country version of, is it Get Low? The apple bottom jeans, boots with the fur. I don't like that song, but for some reason I've got it in my head that if you put a country twang on that would be the goofiest, funniest, like it would be an awesome song if they did a country version of it. All right. The next thing we got is so Dave Chappelle is making the rounds again. And I found out about this from Barbara for you to see her video on it. And I'll just let her say it.
It's just jokes, they said. Dave Chappelle made a joke about a transgender actress, activist, and comedian named Daphne Dorman in his Netflix special. She recently died to suicide.
Alright, I gotta pause it right there. Died to suicide. You mean committed suicide? Because died to suicide is like, oh, that's something happening to them. And who is causing it? Oh, they are. It's like, wait, you can't be both the victim and the perpetrator. That's died to suicide as if this individual wasn't involved in it. It's not like this is a, Jeffrey Epstein situation. This person committed suicide. It's tragic, but the way that people always talk died to suicide as if they're a victim that didn't have any... The only time that died to suicide would make sense is like Seth Rich, or well, I guess he didn't die to suicide, he got mugged. Or the Jeffrey Epstein situation where found a way to break his neck inside of a locked cell while the cameras were down and the guards were asleep. So that didn't happen for this individual. Alright, well, get off my high horse for a second here.
People are not
Yeah,
enough.
but
Enough is enough.
I can't believe
I'll let the video
didn't know about this.
Yeah.
continue.
Clearly people have not watched Dave Chappelle, let alone knew who Daphne really was, because Daphne was the person who laughed at all of his jokes. They even got drinks, they were talking, they were hanging out, they were chilling. Of course, people didn't see her tweet, which was punching down requires you to consider yourself superior to another group. Dave Chappelle doesn't consider himself better than me in any way. He isn't punching up or punching down. He's punching lines. That's his job, and he's a master of his craft. As the trans woman he talks about in the epilogue, I'll tell you that he 100% supports trans people and the LGBT community. Comedy isn't a documentary or a sermon or a TED Talk. It's comedy.
Yeah. And so that, like, I didn't know about those tweets from the individual themselves. And I was like, dude, that's these people spinning the narrative about Dave Chappelle. Like,
Yeah, the person obviously has no issue with it. And
Yeah.
they said Dave Chappelle 100% supports LGBT. He's just cracking jokes because he's a comedian.
yeah.
So
What?
this whole narrative spinning is getting very out of hand and disgusting.
Yeah. That's...
How hard is it to just tell the truth?
apparently impossible for people on these,
And
on the left or these mainstream media organizations. It's...
The saddest thing about that
Mhm.
is that this person committed suicide. Obviously, they weren't happy with the way their life was going. Transgender people have the highest rate of suicide in the world.
Yep.
And yet, everyone thinks by accommodating whatever goes through their head, they're helping. It's not. I saw just a few days ago a YouTube video that there is a kind of movement of trans people reverting back to just being who they're normally supposed to be. Because it turns out it's not the,
Well,
at least one of the people they were interviewing also had other mental issues. They had an eating disorder. It was basically they were not happy with their body, and so they believed themselves to be trans. And after a while, they were just about to get surgery and then stopped and said, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. And they realized it was just a body identity crisis.
yeah.
It was not because they were actually trans. It was the same root cause of why they had an eating disorder. They just weren't happy with themselves. So they went back to being the gender they were born with and are working towards making themselves just happy with who they are. They're actually treating the root cause, not just indulging in the symptoms, which is kind of what all this trans activism and it is a mental issue.
Yeah, the gender reassignment surgery is treating the symptoms at best.
It's not treating.
If it was doing anything, it would merely be treating the symptoms, not the root cause. But based on studies on this, it doesn't help one way or the other. It doesn't. The rates of suicide don't get better after the surgery. There's no perceivable benefit of the surgery.
So, I mean, that's the sad thing. This person committed suicide. They were struggling with something that they couldn't deal with, and so they decided to end it. And rather than people taking a look and saying, why is this continuing to happen. They just look for people to blame that have nothing to do with it.
Well, I've got a theory that of what I think might have occurred, because like you were saying about the individuals that are detransitioning, and I saw Tim Pool's video on that and read the article and the study on that. And one of the main things about that is the people who decided, oh, I'm not actually transgender, or I don't actually have body dysmorphia or gender dysphoria. I have something else and this is not the right path for me. And they stop taking the hormones and they, say no to the surgery and all of that. They are getting attacked by the trans community, by the LGBT community.
They are ostracized.
Yeah.
They're start to berate them. They have a rough time just trying to go back to square one. You are not allowed to leave the plantation. You're not allowed to leave the religion.
Yeah. And what I think happened for this Daphne person is after the Chappelle special, from what I saw there from the tweets, Daphne and Chappelle's relationship was okay. Yeah, I think that
you say you can't agree with him and everything he said. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of
that dropped them, and
what else? I think there was a lot of backlash that they were experiencing from the LGBT community, and it probably lost them a lot of either job opportunities or comic routine. Like, oh yeah, we can't have you here because people are protesting. That it's one of those things where at first they were probably like, hey, this is a good thing. My name's getting out there. People might want to come in. But I'm pretty sure there was more backlash from the vocal minority. And it got to the point where this person was like, what can I do? There's nothing. That's the end. I can't prove any of that. There's not enough evidence yet. But I've
seen quite a few videos like that.
Yeah, I would. Well, I mean, look at the recent ContraPoints, right?
Normal people.
ContraPoints was saying it doesn't make sense to go from being a biological male to being something that isn't female. Like, you can't. That was all they were saying is that they thought male and female, and when you transition, you're going from male to female, or you're going from female to male. Now, going to these non-binary and all these other, transitioning to a two spirits or demi-girl or some of these other obscure things.
I don't even know what a two-spirit is. I think I saw one video with this weird Native American-looking guy with a buzzed head and a ponytail and a bunch of makeup on.
Yeah.
I don't know what he was even talking about.
Or dragonkin or other kin. Like, there's a whole bunch of...
Any sense.
So Contra was saying that stuff isn't for me, and they got hounded by people from the LGBT just yelling and screaming like, oh, how dare you, you're denying our existence, you're spreading hate about people. Contra just deleted their Twitter, and I don't know if they're still active on YouTube, but it seems like their entire social media presence has kind of died out after that. And it's like, yeah, they got bullied, and I think that same thing happened to this Daphne person.
Oh, I think that's very plausible. I mean, I've heard a lot of bullying stories from the LGBT community.
Yeah, Blair was talking about that as well. Like, when Blair first started, that's why Blair became more conservative on her channel and her opinions and things. She was talking about some of her friends and roommates that were part of the LGBT, and it was like, yeah, these people are too crazy. They're too crazy for me. I'm out. And then they go, and
that's the worst part. So if you look at the LGBT community, and I had a discussion with somebody the other day. I don't even understand how that's a community because it's completely different ideas.
Yeah,
LGBT is one thing, P is another thing, and then everybody else is just, it's made up however you feel that day, and they think clothing is your gender, the type of music you listen to is your gender, the colors you like has to do with gender. It's nonsense. It's just a bunch of dumb people who have no idea what gender actually is.
Yeah, and actually, so this is kind of a side story, although we do want to get to the manifesto. It's already been like 45 minutes. But Piers Morgan was in the news for saying something about the otherkins and all of the other random genders that you could just make stuff up, and he's like, well, if that's true, then I can identify as a penguin, and I'm now penguinkin. And then people were trying to get him fired over that, and I'm like,
but
based on your rules, he's allowed to do that.
Yeah,
Who
why
are you to say he's not actually a penguin?
He's not allowed to do what you're saying you're allowed to do.
Yeah, and so I don't really like Piers Morgan. I think he's kind of a pompous jerk, but he's right on this, and he's been doubling down. He's been like, oh, hey, trying to get me fired, that's animal cruelty. I'm like, okay. So he's... that's pretty good.
It is funny.
So, all right. Let's go ahead and... Oh, I did not have my PDF open. That's what I forgot to do before streaming. Alright. So as I get that set up, was there something that you wanted to talk about as far as the next section of the...
I did want to make one other related comment to what we were just talking about, since by next week it'll probably be old news, but I don't know if you caught any of the... Was it MSNBC? No, CNN town hall.
Oh, the transgender town hall. That was in the news.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw anything on that.
I saw bits and pieces. I saw Como, or Chris Cuomo.
That was the only entertaining part of the whole thing.
my pronouns are... Oh.
I mean, basically, he made fun of all of it and made fun of Kamala Harris right there. He didn't realize it because he's an idiot.
She, her, and hers. And like, yeah, mine too. It's like, dude.
Well, I don't understand why she said that. She's never, ever said that. Period. It sounds like...
But just by saying, yeah, mine too, undermines the entire point of the thing.
Yeah. So that part was entertaining. And then they had a couple of protesters, but I don't understand what they were protesting, seeing as the event was in favor of them. That would be like Antifa protesting an Antifa event.
Yeah, I don't know.
And a bunch of people yelling about black transgenders are dying. I did watch another guy's video on that, and I can't remember, something bro. But he was doing mathematical calculations based off of murder statistics and whatever he could gather, and building a per capita to say, here's how many are dying per capita. You know, out of the 100,000, here's how many transgender people would be murdered. And it's actually, for the regular U.S. population, 5 out of every 100,000 are murdered. That's the average per capita. It's like 5.04 or something. For transgender, it's 1 point something. So you're 4 times less likely to be murdered if you're transgender per capita. And he did say black transgenders have a way higher per capita. But if you actually look at black males, they also are murdered way higher per capita. And so he is under the assumption it's not because they're trans, it's because they're black men. And it's not white people or racist cops. It is just happening within the black community. The same thing everyone's yelling about with Chicago, how it's black on black crime. That's where black transgenders are being killed, because they're young black men growing up around all these other young black men killing each other. That's the only reason why their per capita is higher, and it matches the per capita death of just regular black men. So it's just faulty reporting. They're not accurately describing why or the situation behind it.
Yeah, that was weird. I wonder how long that video was frozen, but so apparently the Hangout was frozen, and so when I switched screens, it went back. Yeah. All right, but anyway, so I've got the manifesto pulled up. Why is it showing? It's not showing. Why is that stuck as well? Yeah, I'm not sure what was going on. Apparently, all my captures got stuck or paused. There it goes. Yeah. So. Yeah, that's weird, because they keep talking about, oh, it's hate crimes and we're being targeted and attacked and all that sort of things, but like, okay, if you look at the statistics, less than people who aren't in that group. That's weird.
Correct. Yeah, substantially less. So
That is something that
because they're trans. In fact, they're less likely to be murdered because they're trans. That might be saving some of them from the average murder rate of just anybody who's hetero or cis normative or whatever the term is. I haven't even heard that in a couple.
And I wonder, out of the trans members or the trans people who are killed or attacked, how many of them is it because of their trans status?
No, that's why this guy was doing a per capita death rate. He said the trans community is 3-to-1 ratio trans women. So it is men transitioning to women. For every one woman who transitions to a man, there are 3 men transitioning to a woman. So it's predominantly male sex that are being murdered out of the trans community, but they're not being targeted. So out of the overall community, trans murders have a 1 per 100,000. So if you had 100,000 trans people, 1 would be murdered. Whereas the average population of the U.S., 5 would be murdered.
Yeah.
So it is much less, but just specifically targeting out black trans women or biological sex males who transition to women. If they are between the ages of, I think he said 12 to 28 was the average age range, that's where you see a massive spike, but that's also just in the black community where you see a massive spike in murders. And their per capita is almost the same. So it seems to be more a ethnic thing, or not an ethnic thing, a racial thing, where it's black on black crime that's causing that to spike up.
Yeah, and I would say possibly also where these people are living. Not so much their trans status, but a lot of these people are living in crime-ridden neighborhoods where, there's things like drive-bys, there's things like armed robberies and break-ins. So they may have just been a casualty of their environment or their neighborhood, as opposed to being targeted like, oh, this person's trans, take them out. It's probably wrong place, wrong time, more likely than not. Although we probably don't have the statistics on how often it was like, yep, this person was deliberately targeted because, they were trans. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think it's very unlikely that a murderer would leave behind a note saying, yep, this is why I did it. So, all right. Let's move on to the actual topic of the evening. So we talked about last time about the first section.
The guy's channel is a Nuance Bro.
Nuance Bro? All right.
Yeah, if you ever want to go look up where he does his calculation. So, okay. Continuing on.
Yeah, moving on. So we are moving on to proletarians and communists, right?
Yeah, so section 2 of the Communist Manifesto.
Yeah.
And the beginning of it is just kind of explaining. So the first section was the history of what has turned into proletarians and communist or bourgeoisie. And the second section is what needs to happen to balance things out, which is basically the elimination of the bourgeoisie class.
Yeah.
So that way there are only proletariat.
So,
and
a couple of highlighted sections here, if you want me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
we'll discuss.
So this is the first thing that kind of struck me out. I mean, there's stuff he says before this that all kind of is like, okay, I get where you're going with this, but this is something that struck out to me. So it says, the communist, therefore, on the one hand, practically the most advanced and resolute section of the working class parties of every country. So he's making the argument that communists are a part of every country, and they are growing section, and they're the hardest working section. It's like that section which pushes forward all others. On the other hand, theoretically, like, dude, I know that this is translated from another language, but these sentences are very, very long, and they have multiple, like, this is like a run-on sentence. This is not a standard one thought per sentence structure. And I don't know if that's because it's translated from German or not, or if that's just kind of how these guys were writing. And so part of me is questioning whether that's a German thing that doesn't translate well into English. But the other part of me knows that this is a common tactic when someone is trying to pull one over on someone else. When this is a sophistic tactic where they're trying to slip something by you by putting two disseparate ideas together as if they're the same thing, so that way you don't notice. So that to me struck. That's why I'm like, yeah, this struck me as something. As like, yeah, that seems like an underhanded tactic to try to sneak something through. And they're like, oh yeah, so you just said something. Wait a minute, that doesn't quite sound right. And then they sneak something out, and then the second thing just goes under the radar here. So on the other hand, theoretically, they have over the great mass of the proletariat the advantage of clearly understanding the line of march, the condition, and ultimate general results of the proletarian movement. So what he's saying is the communists have the best. He's basically saying the proletariats are this kind of hodgepodge group, and every country has them, and the communists are the best of everything. They are the best version or the best subsection of the proletariat. They understand everything correctly, and they're on the front lines of all of this. If that's my understanding of this section,
let's see.
Right? Basically, he's saying the communists have all the answers. They're the ones doing things correctly.
I think it is that the communist he's equating with your average worker who is employed, and that they have the understanding that.
But so what I'm saying, no, because that kind of, because he talks about the communists being a version of proletariats, but there are proletariats that are not communists. But he's saying that everybody who is a proletariat should be a communist. That's the argument he's making. Right?
Oh, okay. So in the copy I've got, proletarians are constantly forming unions, or they have opposition against each other.
Yeah,
there could be a labor union here and a separate labor union here fighting for work and saying, hey, this is where our labor or our members are supposed to work. But he says the communist does not fight against other proletarian groups.
Yeah.
It is the combination of all of them saying we all need to work together to just stabilize.
Yeah, and that's why he's saying the communists are the best version. He's like saying of all the proletariats where they're fighting each other, communists are the best version of that, and everybody should rally behind the communist vision.
Yeah. Okay. The communists do not form a separate party opposed to other working class parties. They have no interests separate and apart from those of the proletariat as a whole. Mm-hmm. They do not set up any sectarian principles of their own by which to shape and mold the proletarian movement. So basically, it is just combining all of the proletarian groups, but not driving them towards an objective, just simply saying we just simply need to unite. So all proletarians combined together would make a communist party as a whole.
Well, he does say that because a little bit later on, he does give a clear objective of what he wants them all to combine to do. That's why this paragraph right here, this really long sentence struck out to me. It's like, okay, that's where he's saying, right there, he's establishing, yes, the communists are better than all of these other subgroups of proletariats. We've got the answers. We know where the actual line that we should be pushing, and everybody should unite, not just uniting together, but they should all unite under the communist vision. And to me, that is sneaking his ideology. So I'm pretty sure there were a lot of proletariats at the time, or even whether they identified themselves as proletariats or not, who were like, yeah, we got to stop all this infighting and come together. And he's like, yeah, we got to stop all this infighting and come together. And here's how we do it, by doing communism. And it was a way of smuggling his vision for how things should go into what people are already wanting to do. At least that's what I'm getting out of that particular sentence there.
Yeah, it's so
He merged the ideas so that way, not from this point on, to him and anybody else reading this or that he's arguing with, he's going to pretend as if they're synonymous, as if you're going to merge all of them together, you might as well do communism anyway. So you can't have a combined group of them without having communism.
A union organizer.
Yeah,
is what he sounds like here. Basically, if you have a bunch of non-unionized just laborers and they're complaining about their work conditions, whatever, he's the guy standing up saying, I know the best way for us to take, and we need to organize and unionize, and we will show you the path to go forward to get equality and better wages and a better working environment. So the communists are the unionization of different groups of workers or laborers and saying we can help direct you towards.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying he's smuggling the
Correct.
idea of communism is the only way to do that.
Correct.
That's
the only proper way to organize in order to get the effect of having proletariat succeed and taking the bourgeoisie.
So there are probably a lot of people who are like, yeah, we need to all work together for a common good, and then now they're stuck with communism, and it's kind of, from that point on, it's taken for granted, like communism is the way that we should go, rather than, okay, we've all come together, we're all agreed to, hey, we need to work something out, let's all brainstorm on the best possible way to do this. That doesn't happen. That step is skipped over because they're like, oh, we already know what we need to do, we just need to come together and do this. Which if you've been in any kind of project or that's not how things are done. That's not how any successful idea ever or successful group ever gets their mission accomplished. You come together and there are conflicting ideas and opinions. Usually there is somebody who's appointed to be in charge, but they aren't the ones who make the final decision. They're just there to maintain order. There's a steps, it's the conflict, and then I forget the steps. So there's I don't know, I've been through a bunch of those when I was in the Air Force. There's a bunch of training about conflict resolution. You get a group of random people together to work on a project. At first they're warring with each other, and then they start to kind of come to coalesce more or less, and then they actually start functioning as a single unit with a common purpose. But what ends up coming out of that group is usually better than individuals in that group could have come out on their own. But if what Marx wants here has its way, that would be somebody joining that group, and not the group working together as a whole to come up with the best possible solution, but one person being kind of like the dictator of that group, and their idea is what the group ends up doing, and they are all working for that person, which is, I guess, later on, Marx talks more, it becomes a little more obvious that is kind of his idea. It's not hey, let's all start working together and find the best possible solution. It's like, hey, let's all form together and start doing my solution.
Correct.
Which, if your solution isn't correct, you've doomed the entire group. And I think it's been more than obvious that, yeah, your solution was not correct. So, way to not allow other people the opportunity to have a battle of the ideas to show which one is the best, or to arrive at which one is the best, I should say. All right. That's all I had to say about that. All right, this is going to take forever if I keep going off on these long tangents about every little thing. All right. Okay. Next thing I've got highlighted here is the abolition of existing property relation. Sorry, let me start that over again. The abolition of existing property relations is not at all distinctive feature of communism. Now, this is an outright lie. This is one, like, I saw So I read this at first and I was like, really? You're going to try to make that argument? And later on, he contradicts exactly that. He says definitively, oh yeah, by the way, there's other thoughts or other visions of the world that also abolish property. It's not just communism that abolishes property. And later on, so this is the third section that's highlighted here. In a sense, the theory of communism may be summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property. I'm like, dude, what?
Yeah, well, so in the copy I've got, he says for historical change, he's equating that to something similar like the French Revolution, where they abolished feudal property in favor of bourgeoisie property. So it's kind of the serfs taking over because they have a tyrant king or lord or ruler. And so the peasants, the serfs, would revolt and take over that property. And in here, it says the distinguishing feature of communism is not the abolition of property generally, but the abolition of bourgeoisie property.
Yeah. Which,
The
so
modern bourgeoisie private property.
So I've got these 3 sentences highlighted. So the abolition of existing property relations is not at all a distinctive feature of communism. The distinguishing feature of communism is not the abolition of property generally, but the abolition of bourgeoisie property. In a sense, the theory of communism may be summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property. I'm like, wait, what? How did you say... Like, he says those are 3 paragraphs in a row. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This...
Yeah, but I still think abolition of private property, they're referring to property that is business owned. He considers bourgeoisie business owners and the abolition of business ownership. I don't think he's talking about your home.
No, because they consider that personal property. They
Correct.
say the things that you would personally use as personal property. Their definition of private property is everything that's used for commercial industry.
Yeah.
But that's not a reality in the world. So, but what I'm saying is these 3 sentences that I've highlighted are contradicting each other. These are all 3 of these things cannot be true at the same time. The way they're presented, the way he's presenting them. The 3 highlighted sentences I have, those 3, the way that he's saying them, cannot all be true because one of them is going to contradict the other 2.
Okay, so reread 3 statements.
The abolition of existing property relations is not at all a distinctive feature of communism.
Mm-hmm.
The distinguishing feature of communism is not the abolition of property generally, but the abolition of bourgeoisie property. In this sense, the theory of communism may be summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property. What? That contradicts the first one. The third one contradicts the first one. I don't know how he can say these 3 things and try to make them make sense.
Okay, so basically what he means by it's not a distinctive feature of communism means
But then he says it's...
that communism did not invent it. It is not something communists came up with, and nowhere else in the world has this been done. It sounds like he's implying this has happened before, and is the class rising up to overthrow dictators and tyrants that rule over them unfairly and unjustly. So it's not communists that came up with it. You can see examples in history. But for Communist Party, this is our primary drive, is to abolish ownership of private property. So I think it's just the way you have to put yourself in a certain context to have it make sense. At least that's what I'm gathering from that first sentence.
I understand that.
The abolition of existing property relations is not at all a distinctive feature of communism, which to me means we didn't invent it, but this is our primary focus.
Okay, so
So that's the only way I could see how those 3 statements
wouldn't contradict each other. Okay.
Correct.
So if he's saying, okay. Actually, I think that may have been I think I may have confused myself in No, because when I was reading this, yeah, because
Yeah,
he mentions
it reads a little
yeah, because
silly.
he
I had
mentions
to read over that a few times because I kind of the first time I read that I came to the same conclusion. That doesn't make sense. What do you mean that's not the distinctive feature
and
communism?
then
And
you
yet,
sum it up with that being the
like,
distinction feature.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think he's saying we didn't invent it. This is the way it always goes. This is the overthrow of power. This is what we're trying to focus on. This is the primary idea of communism is to stop private property so this cycle stops. The abolition of private property, which means once the lower class, the common workers, the proletariats overtake the bourgeoisie and in private property, that cycle can't continue because now private property is not allowed. It is abolished. There can be no owners, except for the leaders of the Communist Party, which
Okay.
would dictate how the public property is managed.
Okay. So
Suppose.
yeah, I think I might have. Yeah, I think I might have somewhat shot myself in the foot there by just highlighting the sentences and not rereading the entire paragraphs around them because yeah, that's because I think I started off by explaining it that way and then as I'm going through I'm like wait a minute those three sentences, but this statement about the abolition of private property, he goes on to later undermine that completely in this section. So okay.
Yeah, and then there's a sentence where he's kind of saying, arguing with himself, and playing devil's advocate, and he says, hard-won, self-acquired, self-earned
Yep.
property. Do you mean the property of the petty artisan and of the small peasant, a form of property that preceded the bourgeoisie form? But then he says there is no need to abolish that because the development industry has to a great extent already destroyed it. He's basically saying, we're not going to bother because it's already done.
Yeah.
But that's not true because there are mom and pop shops all over Europe, all over the Middle East, all over the U.S. It is still a major part of society because that is the incentive for someone to own their own business, make their own hours, produce their own product, earn their own income. It is not the goal for a lot of people to end up and say, I'm going to work for this company and then never go anywhere else. In fact, modern day market, people have become more fluid, hopping between companies, trying to earn income, but it is the dream of many people to build their own business.
And what he is avoiding by doing this, because I've got that sentence highlighted as well, is that he's basically saying if we had to, we would. Because he's saying, based on what I'm saying about
there is no
property,
need to abolish that.
We should eliminate this, hard-won, self-acquired, self-earned property. We should abolish that. But since capitalism, according to him, has already gotten rid of that, well, then there's no need for us to do it. But based on the way he's phrasing it, it's like, but if the bourgeoisie hadn't already eliminated all the small businesses, then communists would have to. But he's kind of avoiding that by saying, oh, nope, it's already gone, so we don't even have to worry about it. So what I'm thinking is if he hadn't kind of sidestepped that issue in this manner, people would have been like, wait a minute. Something that I built for myself from the ground up, you would take away from me? Because that's what would have to happen. And so the idea where he previously mentioned, we're just talking about the abolition of bourgeoisie property, but right here he outlines, you get bourgeoisie property from the petty artisan and from small peasants building businesses that turn into bourgeoisie. Like, you can't stop that process unless you're like, I guess you can't have petty artisans and small peasants that start their own businesses. That is implied in his argument, but he sidesteps it.
What he's advocating for, or basically stating here, is that because of modern industrialism, those mom and pop shops, those artisan shops, they're just going to be destroyed inevitably.
Yeah.
Whether or not communists take over, whether or not anybody takes over, this is the future of production. But we don't want that production to be privately owned. We want that to be abolished. There's no private property. So he's saying either way, he believes industry is going, modern production, massive production, is going to wipe out all artisan shops. There will no longer, no matter how it proceeds, be a need for that. But that's clearly not true.
Yeah, that didn't pan out, and now there's more independent creators and independent artists than there have ever been.
Because
Which I'm gonna in the stream here showing off one particular individual who has gone above and beyond and showing off that, hey, this is the new artisans that capitalism creates.
Correct. And so I like to watch a lot of just random stuff on YouTube, especially building things.
Yeah.
So I was watching a series of like a Japanese no nail, no glue, using all these weird puzzle type joints and building furniture and stuff. And those shops are on the rise because that's not something machines do. It is something that takes unique perspective, and handcrafted furniture and artisan goods sell for a lot. There are people paying thousands of dollars for dining room tables, handcrafted with this unique design that is they're the only ones in the world that have this table. It's not mass produced. Mass produced makes cheaper goods, but people still desire artisan things.
Yeah, I mean, we still have like auctions and things along those lines, which are handcrafted, artwork or one of a kind Ming vases and things that were not mass produced.
Handcrafted artisan goods, designer clothing, because that is more rare.
Oh, yeah. Like the fashion industry is multi-billion dollars, and you're talking about people that are spending hundreds of thousands on a single dress.
Yep. Condos are cheap if they all look the same and are mass produced and the same blueprint.
You wanna,
designer home, super expensive, and people will pay it.
Yeah.
So this whole idea that mass industry has already wiped out artisan shops and small businesses, and eventually they're just going to disappear, he made a massive mistake there. This is the same argument that people made with the invention of the automobile, saying, well, it's going to replace the the horse and the cart and buggy, and
put all this. The transportation industry is going to disappear.
The transportation industry boomed, and it's the same thing Andrew Yang is complaining about with automated driving, and how that's going to destroy millions of trucking jobs.
It's going to make Amazon packages cheaper to get to your door. So
I saw a video, and so right now with the trucking industry, they do have some companies trying to make automated trucks, which work good on long stretches. But due to the inability to, say, during a snowstorm, rainstorm, bad traffic, they can't calculate all possible issues that could happen while driving. There has to be a human present. They still have a job. And in fact, it creates more jobs because the people monitoring the automation through satellites, GPS tracking, takes multiple people and a hub, a data center, to track all of these vehicles and make sure everything is working like they're supposed to. It has created more jobs than just the one truck driver.
Yep.
Now multiple people are involved in transporting that one truckload.
And if they can get things to their destination faster because either the driver doesn't need to be awake the entire time or doesn't, because right now that's one of the major things with trucking is you can't drive for they're not allowed, or they're not supposed to drive for like 24 hours straight. They're supposed to, the most they can drive in a single day is 12 hours. Although, there's stories that you can hear from drivers where they've exceeded that, but they're not supposed to drive more than 12 hours in a single day. Well, if there is a reliable automated system where it can drive for 16 hours without a break, well, that means things are going to get to their destination faster.
And then you still have the physical person there for driving through city streets, heavy traffic, any adverse conditions.
Yep.
But now they don't have to strain themselves and drive 14 straight hours, caffeined up and taking no dose.
Yeah, so that means it's less strain on the actual driver themselves, but also means goods are going to get to their destination faster, and that's going to lead to reduction in prices.
So ultimately, what his basis is for the Communist Party is that industry will take over everything, but because all of industry is privately owned, the other 99% of proletariats who do not own business are going to be screwed.
Yeah.
That was his assumption. And there are some businesses that still kind of seem like that. I know like Amazon, they've got hundreds of thousands of employees and
Mm-hmm.
complaining about work conditions and labor. You know, they're not getting enough for the labor, but it's
that I have no idea what was going on there, because based on the actual like the documentation of what's required, they were supposed to be getting regular breaks. They're supposed to be getting, you know, vacation time and all. They're supposed to be getting. There are a lot of perks that people were getting, and they just were not either using them, or I don't know quite what was going on there, because they were talking about like wearing diapers at work because they couldn't take a bathroom break, and I'm like, but there's policies written in the Amazon guidelines where they talk about having a minimum number of breaks in a day. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, why these people were either denying themselves breaks or were being denied by their managers. Because that, if they were being denied by their managers, that's grounds for termination.
So here's what would happen. I used to work for a labor union back when I was 18, worked at a supply shipping warehouse. Since it was unionized, there were mandatory breaks.
Yeah.
You could not work. Like when they said it was break time, stop what you're doing, go take a break. If you're still working, you actually get in trouble for not taking the break. However, on the flip side, there were quotas for the day.
Yeah.
And if through the normal work process, it looked like we were not going to meet the quota by cutoff time, then it went to mandatory overtime.
Oh,
and you had
dumb.
to work because you still have quotas to meet. So it sounds like they do get breaks, but there are quotas, and if you're not going to meet it, you just have to work harder. You have to do more to not take any unnecessary breaks to make sure you meet your quota. So I'm guessing it's something like that. But if there are no set quotas, how do you guarantee your workers are pushing enough to earn the wages and that your products are going to be delivered on time so your business stays in business? You set low quotas, your output and your productivity drop substantially, and other competitors can come in and wipe you off the map because they can meet a higher quota. So quotas are going to be tough. In fact, any physical labor job you do is going to be tough. And if it's an easy physical labor job, you're not going to get paid very much.
Yep.
So I think the more progress we make technologically, the easier life gets, the more people expect things to just be easy. The idea of hard work, you know, putting your sweat and blood into something, is kind of disappearing. You know, we're already at a point where the workdays are just 8 hours, but you can see contractors, independent jobs, people who own their own business, they put in a lot more than 8 hours because they understand the work put in, the more profitable they are, the more successful it is, and the more they can do with that money to subsidize other time that they, you know, now I can pay someone to dig a pool in my backyard instead of doing it myself because I'm putting work into something I'm good at.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, and you don't ever put in any extra work, no extra effort, well, you're not going to get anywhere.
It's comparative advantage. Because while you could take the time to dig your own pool and build it yourself, you would likely spend a lot more time and energy and money to do that. Where if you are better at your current job, you can do that and then pay somebody to do the pool for you. And it works out, even if you could do a better job at building a pool than the person you pay to do the pool, it still works out in your benefit to pay them because you get more bang for your time and energy by doing your current job.
Correct. And additionally, if you are in a low skill labor job or something that is paying minimum wage, why would you sit on that and make that a career?
Yeah, that's the goofy part.
I mean, I've seen people work in warehouses or work in union jobs doing the same thing for year after year after year after year, and not making enough money. Why are you still doing that?
Yeah, it's like, what do you do on your weekends, man? What do you do on your time off? You just take vacation and then go back to work, and you never think, oh, I need to find something better because I don't want to spend the rest of my life here.
Or why not hustle? Show yourself more, you know, astute and skillful than the people you're working with, and possibly get a promotion to some sort of management position, something where you are making more money. I mean, I've done that at multiple jobs. One of the first jobs I had was at Blockbuster. I was promoted to a shift lead within a few months, even though that was my first retail job, because I hustled. I busted my butt. And they said, well, that's the guy we can trust. So I got a raise. I was making more than people who had been there for 2 years. That's what hard work does.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think we need to move a little bit.
Yeah. Okay,
on.
so next thing I've got highlighted here is, but does wage labor create any property for the laborer? Not a bit. What? what absolute lunacy is that? Wage labor doesn't create any property for the laborer? So, okay, it goes on to say, they go on to say, it creates capital, i.e., that kind of property which exploits wage labor and which cannot increase except upon condition of begetting a new supply of wage labor for fresh exploitation. That is absolute nonsense, that entire phrase. So, he says that wage labor doesn't create any property for the laborer. It creates capital, that kind of property. Wait. You just said it doesn't create any property for the laborer, i.e. it creates capital, that kind of property. It doesn't create property, it creates capital, which is property.
No.
That's...
You're missing the second half of the sentence.
No, I'm getting... Right?
You have to do the whole sentence. So, the way I'm reading this, wage labor, as in you've got your employees, they're making the business money. You take that money and buy more conveyor belts, or you buy more forklifts, or you buy more space to expand your assembly line.
Yeah.
That doesn't help the workers, that helps your business grow, the private property end of it.
So?
I think that's what he's getting at.
But
is that capital isn't creating your own business within this business. It is expanding the overall business of which the bourgeoisie is the owner. So when it says that kind of property, no, not a bit. It creates capital, i.e. that kind of property which exploits wage labor. That's why I said you have to read.
No, I know.
That
doesn't make any sense.
Property that is used to exploit wage labor.
So he's only seeing one half of the equation.
Correct.
Right? So he's saying it...
All business owners want to do is exploit work.
Yeah, it's kind of... This is another example of this run-on sentence of multiple ideas within a single sentence, where he has smuggled in the idea that working for pay is in and of itself exploitation.
And to continue on, because that was just a comma, and which cannot... So that kind of property which exploits wage labor, and which cannot increase except upon condition of begetting a new supply of wage labor for fresh exploitation. As in, the only way you're going to make more money is by expanding the assembly line.
Yes.
But he's also negating the fact that efficiency can decrease the amount of work while increasing your output and therefore your capital for the business.
Yeah.
That's a win-win for everybody.
But
he's not.
But his explanation completely ignores that first sentence that he started off the paragraph with. Because his first claim was that wage labor doesn't create any property for the laborer. I'm like, but they get paid, which is capital. The way he's describing capital, he's saying capital is only owned by the bourgeoisie. And I'm like, capital is another way of saying money. Now, capital has two different definitions depending on the context of how you're talking about it. Capital is money itself, or when you're talking about economics, capital is money specifically used in a business. Now, if you're working for pay, you get paid in your paycheck. Now, what you choose to do with that money, you can choose to use it to do your own business, or you can use it for personal consumption. His idea is that, all you do is you get paid, so you're being exploited for your labor, and you don't get to do anything with that money. And I'm like, you can't go and buy land, because there are people who go and buy land with their wages. There are people who save up and buy property. There's people who save up and start their own businesses from the home. Like this, this idea that the laborer cannot turn anything that they're working for on a daily basis into property for themselves is absolute nonsense.
Correct. You are
And he
compensated
switched
for your labor.
Yeah, he switched themes into talking, oh, all their labor just creates more money for the bourgeoisie to expand the business. And I'm like, that did not address your starting sentence at all. That's completely flipping the topic into talking about something completely separate. And I'm like, but they got paid for their time. They got paid for their effort.
Okay, well here, let me set this.
So that's why I'm looking at, I was like, if he's talking about capital as just money going to start a business, no, they get paid and they can use their pay as capital. But if he's talking about it creates capital as in he's talking about just money, then he's saying that kind of property. And I'm like, but you just said they didn't get any property. Money, if he's using the term capital to just refer to money in general, money is the equivalent to property because money can be exchanged for property. If this was an equation, you could say money equals property.
You're oversimplifying, but not analyzing the right parts. So let me put it this way. When you're talking about capital, you're correct. It's money. My capital is my income. It is just my money. When you're talking in business terms, or you said economics, it is money specifically used for the business.
Yes.
However, capital generally doesn't include overhead maintenance. It means free money that you, or free, what is that called? Is it cash flow? Capital is generally referred to as the money that you have available to expand the business.
Yes.
Or capital.
It's not the money required to keep the business going. It's the money either in R&D or in hiring new people or in investment. Yeah.
And it also does not include the labor that you're already paying out to your employees.
Yeah.
Capital is your cash flow, what you have available to invest back into your business.
Cash flow is more than capital because cash flow you could distribute to the shareholders. Or capital, specifically in economic terms, is what's being reinvested in the company.
Yes. So, if you take it from that term, it is money being reinvested into the business to grow it, but that extra money, he's saying, does not trickle down to the employees. It just expands bourgeoisie's business.
Why should it? That's what, like, he started off talking about the wage laborer.
Yes.
And then he switched to talking about the capitalist in the middle of a paragraph.
Different perspectives, right? Let's say you own a plant.
No, I understand what he is saying. What I'm saying is he
I'm not
switched
saying
themes.
what he's saying. Yeah. I'm saying let's take his perspective and just analyze that from a couple of different possibilities. So let's say you do own a plant or a factory. You manufacture whatever the product is.
Yeah.
You got your employees. You start making a profit. If I took this capital and said, you know what, I'm going to be a nice guy and distribute that to all my employees.
Okay.
Great. They'll make some extra money. Your business will not ever grow any bigger. You cannot make your work conditions for your employees better. You cannot increase productivity.
It will
stifle.
It might boost morale, which might make people work slightly harder. There are reasons people give Christmas bonuses and the like. But
as the assembly lines start to deteriorate from use, you have no extra money to invest in buying newer, more up-to-date equipment.
Yeah.
You have spent it all, and now your company starts to stagnate. You cannot increase productivity with no capital, other than a slight morale boost that could potentially say, hey, they can meet quotas, or we can increase quotas.
Yeah, the thing with a morale boost is always temporary.
Correct. It's temporary. So if we went that route and just tried to play the nice guy, saying if the bourgeoisie was just nice and redistributed that money to the employees where it belongs because they're the ones working, that company stagnates, and eventually other competing businesses in the same line will overtake them, and now all those people are out of a job because they have not invested into the continued growth of a business.
Or the company would experience some kind of catastrophe like you were talking about, like breakdown of the equipment. Maybe their customers start losing customers, they start losing revenue, they can't keep all of their current employees. That's how businesses die. There are two. So this is. I guess there are three phases a business can be in. A business can be in decline, a business can be in stagnation, or a business can be growing. Of those three, growing is the only method that a business can stay in business sustainably. If a business is stagnating, anything that comes along that is unexpected is going to send that business into degradation. A business that's in degradation is going to collapse. A business that is growing, if something comes along that's unexpected, they have they can mitigate that because they're like, hey, we're currently growing. Okay, we'll just slow down our growth to meet this new unexpected thing. It's all right. We can plan for this. We can get around this. We can still struggle on. But any of the other two phases that a business can be in, that's the end of it. That they're gonna start spiraling down, and there is no recovery from that.
Correct. So now let's take it from the opposite scenario where let's assume a business has to grow in order to maintain itself, in order to ensure that there will be work and that there is a product to manufacture and that people will continue to want whatever the product is. Not only does that include basic maintenance and utilities, but the growth of your overall infrastructure. So if you've got Windows XP, 15 years ago, and now have no more capital to invest in upgrading your infrastructure, eventually your company is going to crash. Software is no longer going to be available. You're not going to be able to keep up to date with other businesses who do keep their infrastructure up to date. Buying new equipment that is more efficient to make work easier while being more productive. It's the same concept of a farmer. Now we have massive combines where a farmer can plow on his own acres and acres within a single day.
And it used to take several workers, several days. They used to hire a bunch of people from out of town. Hey, come over. We've got so much work, we can't take care of it all ourselves.
Or if you look at assembly line stuff, furniture building, metal working, we now have laser cutting machines or hydroblast machines that can cut out steel into specific shapes that are 100% the same every single time. We don't have to have laborers handcrafting that. Now the laborer can sit at a machine and pump in instructions. Much easier for them, much better output and consistent output, and a greater quota can be reached because they have invested in newer technology, newer machines as it becomes available. There has to be capital in order for your business to stay relevant.
And there's also, it's also safer than conditions used to be. Like during the time when Marx was writing this,
the work situation was bad, and there's pictures of kids covered in soot and dirt and people losing arms and stuff. That's unfortunate. But thanks to the start of that, and as technology increased, the workplace has gotten more and more safe, more efficient, and more beneficial to your average wage labor.
Back in Marx's day, when Marx and Engels wrote this, that was kind of the norm. It was like, oh, hey, somebody just lost their arm today. Yep, just another day at the factory. Now we have markers like this X many days without an accident.
Yeah, we also have safety precautions, and if you don't follow, you can lose your job because you have made it unsafe.
Yep.
Companies don't want you losing your fingers and your hands, your arms, and they want it to be safe because that's what they can advertise, that we're, worker friendly. We care about the environment, or environment as in the work environment, the workplace. We care about our employees. That's a benefit and a boost to the company while also being safer for the wage laborers.
And it's also ultimately it saves them on the bottom line. It's like, accidents are costly. Losing employees are costly. Those are it's like, oh, I can pay, like I said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's kind of that adage is like, doing these safety precautions save time and money for the company, whereas if that causes somebody to get injured or to, hey, a machine breaks down, well, then they're going to be out of work for an entire day. They're going to lose all that production. But hey, just 5 minutes of maintenance checks or, going around and doing these safety checks. Okay, hey, we just saved there was a potential leak there that could have, killed one of our employees or caused this machine to blow up. oh, we spotted that leak early, got it fixed, no problem. 5 to 10 minutes of extra work and time and patience probably just saved us a day or two of production. That's what they found out as this process kept going on. It was like, oh, maybe we were being, I'm guessing some of that was the technology wasn't there for them to have any sort of reliable safety measures. The technology is there now. But the other fact is a lot of these factory owners, that was kind of, safety was a secondary concern because it always came down to the bottom line. But as they ran more and more of their business, they started to realize, oh, safety is actually tied to the bottom line. So now they realize it's in their best interest to protect their employees and to protect their equipment and to make sure that everything keeps running the way it is currently running.
Mm-hmm.
As far as, the ability to continue to produce a product without at the planned rate. So another area that if Marx had, and so a lot of these features, a lot of these trends occurred within Marx's lifetime. Now remember, at the time Marx wrote this, he was in his 20s.
Yeah.
By the time he was in his 40s and 50s, a lot of these complaints that he had about capitalism, they were starting to become extinct within most modernized industries. But he, to the best of my knowledge, in any of his writings, never recanted anything he said previously when he was younger. He stood staunch on these principles and these beliefs that he established when he was 20-something, even as they were being proven incorrect in his own lifetime. So, I think we'll move on to the next section here. So, next thing I've got highlighted here is capital is therefore not only personal, it is social power. Now, I don't remember why I've got that highlighted exactly here. Let me read the context.
Do you have the rest below it?
Hmm?
So, when therefore capital is... read this paragraph above it, or I'll read it. To be a capitalist is to have not only a purely personal, but a social status in production. Capital is a collective product, and only by the united action of many members, nay, in the last resort, only by the united action of all members of society can it be set in motion. Capital is therefore not a personal, it is a social power. So what he is saying is that because capital can only be achieved through the mass effort of multiple people, the capital therefore belongs to all people. That's why it is a social power, not for you personally.
So, okay, so I get, So in context, that makes more sense, but this is incorrect, and it's...
Now, if you have the focus or mindset of equality, right? Everybody pitched in, everybody gets an equal share. That makes sense if everyone gave an equal effort or input.
Yeah.
However, if it is a tiered hierarchy, right? You're on the sales floor and you're working to get business from other companies, and you have exceeded or you've got new customers into the business and therefore increased capital for the business by 2%. That's massive versus a guy who cleans off an assembly line section, which doesn't take any skill. As somebody on day one, they can do it. If they didn't show up for work one day, it actually wouldn't hamper or do anything to productivity or their inability to meet quotas to ship out whatever the product is. So does he deserve the same share that a salesman would who increased the capital of the company by 2%? That's not equal input or equal effort. I understand work is hard, but there's certain work that just does not benefit a company as much as others.
Yeah. So this is something that the wage labor or the labor theory of value that Marx adhered to for a lot of his writings and a lot of his ideology is the idea the harder you work, the more you should get paid, but that's not always the case. It's the results of your work that determine how much you should get paid. Because you can work really, really hard in the wrong direction. So this is the example I brought up, I think when I don't remember who I was debating at the time. You can spend all day digging ditches in the middle of nowhere. That's a lot of hard work. That's a lot of energy. But if nobody needs those ditches dug, why should you get paid? What's the purpose? Like, what benefit has digging those ditches out in the middle of nowhere done? Nothing. And I can spend 5 minutes looking at something looking at a bit of software and come up with a better solution, and maybe spend an hour programming something that automates something that somebody was taking days to do, or was taking something they would do constantly, and they had to keep doing this over and over again. If I wrote a program that did it for them, I saved them a lot of time and energy. I didn't work very hard for the several hours I put into creating the program, but I ended up saving this person a lot of time and energy. That is a net benefit to them. Even though it's something easy for me, the value I provided is something they would be willing to compensate me for. So it doesn't make any sense to be like, oh, well, this person spent 18 hours digging ditches, they should get compensated, and this person only worked for 2 hours, he shouldn't be getting very much. And I'm like, I just saved this company 60 hours a week of labor hours.
Now that person can do another task
Yes.
to help the company, and this automated process is now in place to make it easier.
Yeah.
Additionally, what he's not taken into account is it seems he's focused on particular industries.
Yes.
The production that, let's again go with the furniture building.
Mm-hmm.
They cut the trees down. They chop up the wood. They shape it. They plane it out. They get their planks. They manufacture the furniture from start to finish. But in modern technology, modern society, things are put together in parts. So even an automobile, Ford does not manufacture all their parts anymore because it's cheaper to outsource certain parts to other companies that just build mufflers or just make car batteries. Ford doesn't need to make car batteries.
Mm-hmm.
Other companies do it. So they purchase those batteries from the other company, and at the end, Ford assembles an entire car. Does the battery manufacturer get any extra money from that car, even though their parts and their labor went into partially into assembling the full car? No, their business is batteries. They get their money off of selling the batteries, so that's where they get their money.
Mm-hmm.
And yet for an end product, it can take multiple companies. At what point does one business have any say-so in the capital of the final product assembler? Each business has their own capital based off of what their work is. So looking on a grand economic scale with multiple businesses buying, trading, selling with one another, that way they don't have to, they can specialize in one specific area, which specialization has made a massive boost in safety and productivity and efficiency. Specialization, allowing a company or a specific department to specialize in this one thing rather than saying our whole company does it from start to finish. As in, if you were an artisan shop,
yeah,
you would handcraft everything. But if you can outsource certain aspects of your job to another company, that other company doesn't have a say-so in your business's capital. You are already purchasing their product. Their services are done.
And that's so that is something that, so what Marxist or communists would have you believe is, so let's say, so your example of a car, so Ford ends up selling that car for $20,000, right? The parts and labor and all that sort of thing. So, well, the guy who sold the battery, that probably is only like, what, 200, if that, like for a high-end battery that goes into a brand new car, maybe 250. But what Marx would have you believe is that entire 20 grand for the new car should be evenly distributed amongst all the people who worked on making the car, including the guys who worked on making the battery for the car. Now, that it makes sense to the people who are Marxist, but in doing a system like that, like right now, if the battery manufacturer puts a price on their battery to sell it for $250, they sell the battery, they've made their profit, they've made their what they set out to do, and they can make new batteries and they can keep reinvesting in their company. Now imagine if Marxists got their way and it was all combined together, the battery manufacturer wouldn't get any kind of compensation until that car is sold. So now there are brand new cars that go onto the dealer's lot, they're selling for $20,000, right? Well, they sit on that car lot for a year, or 2 years, or 3 years, and hey, maybe nobody wanted to buy this particular car, and it goes to, all these different, gets passed around to different dealers. By the time that car gets sold, instead of being sold for $20,000, by the time it actually sold, it sold for $6,000. Now that battery manufacturer is getting a smaller cut of that car's profits. That's the trade-off that Marxists don't consider or don't look at. And all the ones that I've talked to never kind of consider that. They're like, because this is what they talk about when they're talking about, oh, the wage labor, that the worker is putting all the work in and they're not getting adequately compensated for their work. And I'm like, but they get paid no matter what. They get a paycheck at the end of the week. The person who owns the business, they may get all of these things built that they paid the laborers to build or create. There's no guarantee that they can sell the products. There's no guarantee that they're going to return a profit on what they paid these laborers to create.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that trade-off of guaranteed pay or guaranteed income versus potential income. And yes, while the potential for the owner is greater, the risk is greater as well. And that's something every Marxist or every communist I've talked to in like the almost 10 years that I've been talking about this with people, not one of them has ever considered that. And even when I bring it up to them, they're kind of like, oh, that's just crazy talk. And I'm like, what?
That is economics. That's how it works.
But yeah, so the other thing about this is he's talking about capital being a collective product, and I'm like, only if you're ignoring the small artisans and small mom and pop shops that you ignored previously in this section, because they get capital as well, and their capital is not a collective product because they are a small company. They're not these big factories with multiple employees. They are a handful of employees, or probably just a family, or maybe even just one person that is creating capital on their own. So the idea of all capital being a collective product, these small businesses defy that completely. And he's dismissing those as, oh, those are on their way out. Those are being extinct. We don't have to worry about those. There are more small businesses now than there have ever been before in human history. Small businesses make up 80% of businesses in the U.S.
Yeah.
Small businesses with under 20 employees are 80% of the U.S.'s numbers of business. Granted, the market share or how much profitability those companies has is dwarfed by these, the major conglomerates like Walmart and Amazon and things like that. But the vast majority of employees don't work for Amazon or Walmart or Facebook. They work for an independent business. Most people work for a small business that has maybe 20 total employees.
Well, so here's the thing. If you look at Amazon, they don't actually produce those products.
Yeah.
They come from everywhere else. They are just a distribution company. Well, I know they got Amazon Prime and they're trying to do some movie stuff, whatever.
Even with Amazon Prime. So this is something I don't know if I've mentioned this on the stream before. So that was something I got involved with and still technically am, although I haven't been actively working that business. Buying products and then selling them on Amazon. I was selling products. I'd never seen the product. I buy a product, it gets sent to the Amazon warehouse, and then whenever somebody clicks on the Amazon product, they buy it from my company. That I still have products on there that are being sold. Like I said, I'm not actively working it, but those products were sold Amazon Prime. My company was selling Amazon Prime products. And
So Amazon is more of a service, not a production company. They just facilitate transportation of goods, but those are a lot of independent people selling their wares on Amazon.
Yeah.
Because of that massive entity, hundreds of thousands of independent people like yourself and whoever, other manufacturers, I can find refurbished systems, game systems, TVs, brand new stuff, all kinds of crazy inventions, 500 different kinds of irons, 2,000 different kinds of microwaves. This massive variety in all these different independent businesses being facilitated because of a service, but that's what boosts their business. So even though we have massive conglomerate businesses, and some people say, oh, Walmart this or Walmart that or Microsoft this, without Microsoft, our tech industry, our accounting software, our databases, the state that computer science has gotten us to this far, that has massively impacted modern business, it would not exist. Microsoft Windows is like 80% of all commercial software, and it's almost 100% of home software or operating systems.
All right, we have gotten through maybe 2 pages of this second
Oh,
half.
yeah.
So but it's already almost 9 o'clock, man. So I'm just started scrolling through, and I'm like, dude, we didn't get hardly anywhere through this section. Too many side tangents, and that intro took a little bit longer than expected. Oh, whoops, I think I might have scrolled up too much, because I just saw bourgeoisie and proletariat. That was the first section. What page does the second section start on? Like 20 something? 23? 22. Okay, so we got to page 23 in my edition of this. We got through 1 page and about 2 to 3 paragraphs here. But there's a lot to unpack here, and I know... yeah, but his idea that capital is therefore not only personal, but it's social power, it's like that. It can be a social power in certain aspects, but not all capital is social power. But that seems to be what he starts talking about from this point on. He's saying, oh, capital isn't only personal, it's also social. And then he goes on to treat capital as if it's always a social power from this point on. And again, it's this Marxist ideology, or the Marxist belief that a lot of the people who subscribe to communism and to Marxism, they get in this idea that capital is only big businesses. Those are the only places that capital have, and they have all the power. And I'm like, that I have no idea who's teaching this stuff. But like I said, the majority, 80% of businesses in the U.S. are small businesses. Those are the businesses being ignored by this very statement.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the businesses where the owner knows every employee by name and talks with them on a daily basis. That's not the relationship that Marx is describing. So Marx seems to have this huge stick up his butt about what accounts for 20% of total businesses in the U.S., and he's focusing on them as if those are the only element of capitalism. And he completely dismisses the entire middle section, the entire section that makes up what is the middle class.
Yeah.
So
he's only considering lower class, which would be the proletariats, and the upper class, the bourgeoisie. There's only 2.
Yeah.
But the middle class here, at least in Western society, is the largest.
Yep. Well, it's still the largest, but it is going down year over year. And if you look at Thomas Sowell broke this down, and also other economists, man, I cannot say words right now. But Thomas Sowell broke this down and was talking about the reason we're seeing the middle class slightly shrink over the past, I think, 10 or so years is not because people are getting poorer. It's because people are getting richer. The percentage of people in the middle class is shrinking, and that number and the number of people in poverty in the U.S. is also shrinking. The area that is growing is the top. It's the upper class. The upper class is growing, which means that the people in the upper class came from either the poorest or the middle class. And I was like, people are like, oh man, the middle class is shrinking, the middle class is shrinking. Oh, down with capitalism. Like, the top is growing. You can't have the top grow and not have one of the other 2 sections increase at the same time. That's not how percentages. If there's 100%, you can't have the top become 26% without that percent coming from the bottom half somewhere, or from the bottom 2/3 or 3/4. Man, 25. Yeah, it would have to be the bottom 3/4. It's got to come from that bottom 3/4 somewhere in there. All right. So let's tackle. Let's just try to get through the rest of this page here. So he goes on to say the average price of wage labor is the minimum wage. Oh, now this is this might have been true in his day. Wow,
this wasn't true on any day, ever.
It wasn't. Yeah, I was like, man, I don't know enough about the era, the wages in the era that he was in. Oh no, I looked this up. We have no idea. We don't know because this wasn't actively being tracked. How can he say the average price is? Oh wait, what? That doesn't make any sense.
No, what? So
in order for minimum wage to be the average, you would have to have somewhere around 30 to 40% earning no wage whatsoever. Because if minimum wage is the average, you're going to have about just regular standard deviations. Regular standard deviations, you're going to have 80% around the average within one standard deviation of it.
Well, additionally, the average price of wage labor, what wage labor are you talking about? If you're talking about me getting a temp job and loading pallets on a truck, which anybody can do, that's not going to pay much. That's still wage labor. Or if you're talking someone on construction, if they are a qualified, plumber or electrician or whatever, it's still wage labor, but they're going to make substantially more. Why would there be a minimum of the average? If you averaged out all just labor jobs, that minimum wage would be much higher than what is even required for the lowest level jobs.
Yeah. So,
like,
okay, so
way too high to where why would anybody?
So it's not 80%. It is 65%. Or no. It is 70%. Right? 34 and 34, that's 68. Yeah, it is. So if the average is 0, you're going to have 70% within one standard deviation of the average. That's just statistical breakdown. You're going to have 70% within one standard deviation. You're going to have 90% within 2 standard deviations. And I think it goes up to 99% within 2.5 standard deviations. So if the minimum wage is the average, you would have to have 34 plus 13, that's 47. You would have to have about 50% earning less than minimum wage.
Yeah.
What? 50% of wage laborers don't earn the minimum? Or then how is it the minimum? Maybe he's just using that as a broad term and using average incorrectly.
So if with the rest of that sentence, he said an average price of wage labor is the minimum wage, i.e. that quantum of the means of subsistence, which is absolutely requisite to keep the laborer in bare existence as a laborer. So he's stating minimum wage is what is needed to keep someone alive so they can still continue to work. But it does not allow
anything beyond that.
To do anything else beyond living to work.
Yeah, which history, even in Marx's time, history disproved that. Because what he's describing right there would accurately describe the feudalism system.
Yes.
Where serfs were just barely able to keep... people moved from farms and from subsistence living to factories to get beyond subsistence living, what he's talking about. Means of subsistence, which is absolutely requisite. That's subsistence living. People left subsistence living to move to factories and start working in industries.
Well, additionally, you can't really qualify a bare existence or subsistence living because a 21-year-old single person has a much lower subsistence requirement
than a family of 5.
Who's 50 or starting to have some health issues, or someone who's disabled, or someone. There's a multitude of different things that change the cost of subsistence. So if we set the bare minimum, how much is required for somebody who is healthy, capable, and can probably go days without eating, their minimum level is much lower than what we even currently have
Yeah.
as our minimum wage. And that's before this whole $15 an hour, wage increase that they're trying to push over the country.
Yeah, so the world standard for what is considered poverty or subsistence or bare existence is $1 a day. That is what the WHO, I think it was the WHO established as the bare minimum. If you're earning for people who are earning $1 a day, that's what they considered absolute poverty, right? That's the right. You're looking that up. So hopefully I'm not. Hopefully my memory is serving me correctly right now, because
that one I'm trying. It's a little hard because if you look at poverty rate in the U.S.
Yeah, poverty in the U.S. is different.
It's 12.3%. However, our poverty level is higher than what the world considers.
Yeah,
like the World Health
Because when you're
Organization.
talking about the world as a whole, $1 a day, and because that's the rate that they're looking at. What Steve Pinker was writing about in his book, when he's talking about that has, oh man, what was it? It's something like reduced by 20%. The number of people who are living on $1. No, it was ridiculous numbers. So they were talking about reaching a goal of reducing the number of people on that below the poverty line, and they ended up doubling their predictions in half the time. Let's see. Let me. Yeah.
And for the most part, this all comes down to subjective views.
Yeah.
So in modern first world societies,
sorry, minimum of $2 a day, not $1 a day.
in first world societies, it's not just a roof over your head. They say a refrigerator is a necessity, air conditioning is a necessity, indoor plumbing is a necessity. Even now, they're saying cell phones in case of an emergency. And AOC just had a comment about internet being a necessity.
Okay, so this is, I'm not sure if this is the WHO, but so here's something from Poverty Threshold, the Wikipedia article. Says absolute poverty, which is what they're talking about, less than $1.90 a day, so less than $2 a day, fell from over 80% in 1800 to 10% by 2015.
10% of the U.S.
No,
or
global. This is the globe. This is talking about the world as a whole. It went from 80% of the globe being less than $2 a day to less than 10% living on $2 a day.
That's massive.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Considering Marx wrote his book about 1/4 of the way through that process. And he's talking about how this is, we're getting rid of all this. It's like so here's the thing is we're also dealing with percentages. The global population in 1800 was a lot less than the global population in the year 2015. And
it's like half.
Yeah. And we still saw a 70% reduction in the number of people who are earning less than $2 a day. That's
billions taken out of poverty level.
Yeah. Most of that is in China, Russia, and India. Because those are the places that saw the most economic boom. I think within from 1980 till today, those are the three countries that have saw the most significant increases. And with Russia, it was mostly after the collapse of the USSR that they saw this massive expansion and we're finally getting out of that utter collapse. Okay. So they were part of that reduction in poverty. Although, because when they didn't start getting into the whole communism thing until 1900. But even before communism, there was Russia was still a fairly poor country overall. I mean, a lot of rural farmers and things along those lines prior to the fall of the not the Bolsheviks. What's the Tsars? what exactly was that form of government called? It was I know it was a monarchy, but what was the... Was there a name for that? Outside of a monarchy and the czarship? It was just called Russia? I'm trying to think of what the name of... I guess the Russian czarship. I don't know if there's a better or more accurate terminology for that. The Russian Empire? That doesn't quite sound right, but... Okay. Anyway, that's a side tangent. Just a monarch.
No, I mean that. I guess that would just be the description is Russian monarchy. I don't know what an official title would be.
Yeah, it doesn't seem
like a kingdom or a dynasty.
Yeah, because there was the British Empire and there was the Yang Dynasty and stuff like that, but there's no like the Alexander Dynasty or something like that. It was just that's just the Russian monarchy. All right. Okay, let's see. I got 4 more things. All right, how are we doing on time? It's already 9:10. Okay. So I think so this whole idea that minimum wage is the bare requirement to keep on existing, and that's the other thing is like in the U.S. People are like, oh yeah, people need minimum wage is not enough. People need a living wage and all that sort of thing. And I was like, on minimum wage, people still have microwaves, cars. They still have like a lot of washing machines. They still have a lot of things that are not poverty. And yet they consider themselves like to be poor when they have access to all these things. Like, these are things that were not owned by the majority of people in the U.S. even 40 years ago. And yet these are things that, a lot of people who are in poor neighborhoods own big screen TVs. They have, furniture and stuff and all of these things that were considered luxuries just a few decades earlier. These are now things that are common within a house. And like what you're saying, the AOC has talked about internet being necessary. I was like, no, internet and cell phones are luxuries.
And I think every public library has internet access available.
Yep.
So if you live anywhere in a area, just go to a library if you need to look something up. At least till you get yourself situated to where you can afford internet providers.
Yeah, the American version of poverty is way higher than what people outside of the U.S. call their regular lives. Because the global standard for absolute poverty is less than $2 a day.
Yeah, I would equate it to someone walking around with a new pair of Nikes that cost $100, and you got the other kid at school that's wearing Walmart shoes, and then so they're considered living in poverty, and that's not fair.
Yeah, when real poverty is no shoes.
Correct. So if you're paying $5 for some Walmart shoes, yeah, you don't have a lot of money, but you still have shoes. They cover your feet. They work. No, you don't have $100-something pair of Nikes. But at some point in your life, if you work well, if you work smart, you'll rise through the pay grades just like everybody else who does that.
All right. Okay, let's move on to the next point. So all we want to do away with all that we want to do away with is the miserable character of this appropriation, under which the laborer lives merely to increase capital and is allowed to live only insofar as the interest of the ruling class requires it. Again,
yeah, that's not relevant at all.
That was probably an appropriate description if you're describing feudalism.
Yes. Or maybe early, the start of the Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
Which people getting out of feudalism.
Yeah.
This doesn't equate at all to modern society.
And this is where you go into the compared to what? Because if you're talking about like the very start of the Industrial Revolution, that was the norm for everyone. And in fact, well, I guess you were lucky if you had a subsistence living. Because remember, the life expectancy back in those days was around 35. So if you were lucky, you had a subsistence living. So, yeah, you were one of the better off ones if you had a subsistence living prior to the Industrial Revolution. And after the Industrial Revolution, subsistence living became the minimum, as opposed to, I guess not the maximum, but there were a lot of people who, I mean, thinking back to frontier times and I mean, basically kind of like the Wild West and the Gold Rush in the U.S., there were a lot of people who risked everything to go and starve themselves and work in a mine, hoping to strike it rich, and came back empty-handed, or, or they would live out in the wilderness and then they got, mauled by a bear, or they died, like the Donner Party and things like that. That was the norm. Like the Oregon Trail left a trail of bodies. That was the norm back then. And now we've got, in the Industrial Revolution, we've got people working in the factories, and yes, there are deaths and there are casualties, and there are people barely getting by. And it's like, well, just a few years before that, a lot of people were dying. Like, there's a reason the global population was increasing slowly until the Industrial Revolution, and then there's a massive exponential increase in population.
Well, something else that he's kind of assuming only two tiers.
Yes.
Bourgeoisie, proletariat. Bourgeoisie owns everything. Proletariat is just your average factory worker. That's across the board, your bottom. You look at any sort of modern business, there are multiple levels.
Yes.
You can work your way up from the mailroom and then become, chief administrator or whatever of the mailroom, or work yourself to another department, or move up the chain. I started off at the help desk on IT and have worked up to my current position. Multiple steps in there.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're at an educated or a higher skill set, you're going to get paid more. If you can get yourself into a management position or even a director position, which there's multiple director positions, multiple VP positions in large companies, those guys make pretty good. But they're still not this bourgeoisie. They're not the board of directors. They're not the CEO, CFO. They still have their boss and their boss's boss.
Mm-hmm.
But they're definitely not anywhere near poverty level.
Yeah.
There's this whole spectrum right in the middle, going from bottom level jobs up to the very top. And even if you never get to that very top where you're a CEO, CFO, COO, whatever, there is plenty of opportunity within a lot of big companies for growth, expansion, and to make good money.
Yeah. So
this is just how the Industrial Revolution advanced, but it is not a two-tiered system at all.
And there are a lot of people that are at those in-between positions that they don't just have their income from their jobs. Like, so there was when I first joined the Air Force, I was, your basic grunt airman, making the minimum wage in that particular profession. And, when you're getting in process to a base, they had, officers come in, those would be the Air Force's version of the petty bourgeoisie. These weren't generals or anything like that. These were the kind of the low tier. And they were talking about investing and buying properties and, either investing in retirement accounts or in accounts that were generating money outside of your base pay, and talking about, again, rental properties and things along those lines. And one of the guys who came in was he was a major, so he was kind of higher up in that tier, and he says, I own multiple houses. I've owned a house at every base I've ever been deployed to, and after I move out of that house, it becomes a rental property, and I'm making money outside of my very good salary by doing that. And I was like, dude, that's genius, and that's exactly the kind of advice that these, granted, you can't go from airman to an officer. That's not... You would have to do. There is the opportunity to go officer, but most people don't. But they go up to E9, which gets paid about as much as somebody halfway through the officer pay scale. Still very good money. So yeah, an E9 would make about the same as a major. And I'm like, yes, that is something achievable as an enlisted member to own properties in multiple states and have supplemental income on top of your base pay.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what so the other, my bosses at other organizations have kind of done the same thing. It's like, yeah, they made a lot more money than me, and they also were earning money from alternate methods outside of their primary profession. And I was like, that's the opportunity that opens up when you're at those, and these are not people that own the company. This is not like the Donald Trump. This would be kind of like the middle manager underneath Donald Trump, and he's like, yeah, by the way, I'm getting money outside of my 9 to 5 as well. And I was like, yeah, that's something that's completely ignored by everything that's in this so far. Is those people in those mid-manager tiers, not only are they making more money than the people that, the proletariat, they're also investing in other things, and they're earning money outside of that as well. And those people don't fall in the bourgeoisie. Those are the petty bourgeoisie that are also increasing their own capital or their own wealth through alternative means. I guess to sum that up, their view of the world, the Marxists and communists, it's all about physical labor, and that's the only way to make money is your steady job and your 9 to 5, and no, outside of that, there's no other way to make money.
And to them, there is no mobility.
Yeah.
You pretty much cannot go from being a proletariat, shoot your way up, become bourgeoisie.
Because that's what it's talking about, like, oh, just this mere subsistence and minimum wage and bare standard of living. I'm like, as if you never get a pay raise, you never get a promotion ever in your entire career at a factory, or there's no chance to move up to middle management. You're stuck there until you die. I'm like, nope, that's not even true in his day.
The only times we actually hear about that or any news reports are people who have chosen to just stay at the lowest paying job and have excelled or gone nowhere.
Yeah.
People who have remained burger flippers for over 10 years. Why are you still there?
Mm-hmm.
And why is that society's fault that you're still there?
Okay.
If you start at minimum wage and you're still making minimum wage a year later, something is wrong.
Yep.
You're either working for a bad company, go get another job, or you yourself have lacked the skills, lacked the effort for the company to say, yeah, you've earned a raise.
Yeah, that's the other thing is why is it not a norm for people at a minimum wage job at one place to not apply for a job in other places? Like, if you've been flipping burgers for McDonald's for 5 years and you're still earning minimum wage, you can go, like, hey, on one of your days off, go to Burger King, go to the competitors of McDonald's, and put in your application and see if the manager there is being like, dude, you've been doing this and you're still earning that? I'll double your salary if you come and work for me.
Or maybe try and get a job at a restaurant.
Yeah, or move up to something outside of one of those, bare bones fat. Like, yeah, hey, if you go to be a chef at one of the kind of more gourmet restaurants. But the people who are earning minimum wage like that don't have either the ambition or the forethought to, like, oh, I should probably, if I'm not going up in my current position, I should be seeking positions outside. I don't know if that doesn't occur to them, or if people don't explain that to them, or people don't talk about that. Is like, even going back to my original point, even switching from a low-level position to another low-level position within a competitor's company can also cause a pay raise. Even if you're doing the same job just for a competitor, you're likely to see an increase in wage. Just because they're going to be like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing, I don't have to train him as much, I'm willing to pay him more because he's worth more than me just hiring some random person on the street and trying to train him to do this job, and it may or may not work out. At least this guy has been doing this for a long time. I'm under the assumption that he would continue to do this for a long time under me. It's worth paying extra for this employee. That happens a lot as well, although there has to be the drive to go over and check, hey, would you hire me? Is this opportunity available? All right. Moving on to the next point. So this is another thing I've got highlighted. In communist society, accumulated labor is but a means to widen to enrich, to promote the existence of the laborer. So, and that's where he's putting that as the juxtaposition to his version of capitalism. Is capitalism, he's described it so far, as it only benefits the capitalist. It has absolutely no benefit to the laborer, and they just live on subsistence and they're stuck there forever until they die or get replaced by another, of the infinite cogs in the machine is their view of how everything works, or their view of how everything works.
The only reason they're even paying this minimum subsistence wage is to make sure you stay alive, to have offspring, to produce more laborers. You're just cattle.
And he's saying, oh, but our version of how things would work is all of the labor would be to benefit the laborer, not the capitalist. It's going to benefit all the people working. And
well, I mean, in modern society, it's absolutely nothing like that.
Yeah, so not only is his version of capitalism completely off, both in his own day and in current day, but he's also got this idea that if a business was all about the employees rather than increasing the business itself or expanding the business or growing the overall capital available to the business or to the business owner or to the managers, if it was just about the lowest of the employees, then it would just somehow be better overall. And that's it's one of those things that I guess sounds nice, but there's no evidence that that is sustainable or that that is actually going to produce a better result than the system that currently is. And oftentimes, when such efforts are implemented, they produce worse results for the people involved. There are a couple exceptions, like the Mandragoran, is it Mandragoran?
It's like Mandragon.
Mandragon. I'm not sure how you exactly pronounce that. So there's a couple standouts like that, but even looking at the overall structure for them, there is still a hierarchy within that business. So there are still senior executives and CEOs, and there are, and the majority of their business is actually insurance. So it's kind of more like sales representatives rather than it's kind of there's a lot of commission based pay on that. So I was looking into that and I'm like, wait, this is they're this is proof of communism working. I'm like, but it's still a hierarchy, which Marx would look at the top employees of that company and call them the bourgeoisie. And also there is quotas for insurance sales. It's one of those things where they can reliably earn a minimum as if they don't sell so much of insurance or whatever, they can expect at least a safety net of they're guaranteed at least a certain wage. But if they meet their quotas or they surpass them and all that sort of thing, then there's bonuses on top of that as far as just being overall sales representative. I'm like, how exactly does that fit into the communist model? Because that doesn't sound that sounds more capitalist to me than communist to me. But that's one of the examples that people keep pointing to as like, oh, this is how communism would actually be if this was applied worldwide. And I'm like, that I don't think Marx would approve of the structure of this particular business, because this looks like capitalism to me. But what do I know? I guess. Sorry, that was a kind of little side tangent there, but it's the idea that his idea is the minimum, or at least I should say the idea he's espousing in this book, because if you look at what he actually did in real life, what he and Engels did in real life, they were very, very hypocritical in the way that they treated the employees at the factory that Engels owned. So the idea that the laborers are the people who should be benefiting the most from working in a company, that would somehow magically make everything better. Every business, with the exception of a few, hasn't exactly played out that way. Because actually there was an example recently where somebody, how was it? I forget whether he raised the minimum wage of people in his employ, or if he decided to pay everybody the same rate or something along those lines. So there's a guy who inherited a company, tried to run it under communist methods, and it collapsed within a year. Oh, I gotta look that up because I gotta get the details right on that one. All right, man. Oh, okay, yeah, 70K. So this guy, so he tried to pay all of his employees what the top earner in his company was earning.
What?
So whew. So this is 2015. So he had a credit card processing company. I don't know if he ran it or if he inherited it or something along those lines. Doesn't make it clear. But he started paying all of his employees $70,000. Minimum wage of $70,000. No, where's that's not the rest of it. Because the business went under. Bum, bum, bum. Because I'm not seeing. Because I know that they went bankrupt, right? That doesn't make sense. Yeah, there it is. So he had 120 people and employees. Bum, 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 bum. And that's from 2015. That's not because they went bankrupt. If I'm not mistaken, where's the part where they go bankrupt?
You know what the name of the company was?
Thinking it was this place called Gravity Payments, but some of these places are saying it's still in business, and I'm like, that's not what happened. Because this was something. Maybe I'm mistaken on this, because apparently that place stayed solvent, which that seems bizarre. Let's see. It's something called gravity payment processing, and that's how is he paying 70K to all the employees? Oh, because they're probably not. All right, maybe this is a bit too much of a side tangent. But maybe I was misinformed on this. Yeah, he raised the minimum wage to 70K, and apparently the business is still in business. Yeah, so the... Oh.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay, a bunch of people left the company. That's what happened. So, okay.
Yeah, his top earners left because now new hires were making just as much as them when they've had to bust their butt for years to get to that level. In this article, I found the company has annual revenues that are still about 150 million, but the profits are expected to be just 2.2 million, most of which goes towards the payroll increase. The owner, Price, cut down his own compensation to 70,000 and is having to rent out his house to make ends meet.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, that's has to rent out his own, like, okay, so they do 150 million a year and they only make 2.2 million because all their money is going to pay, and he's paying himself 70,000 a year and is renting out his house. Okay, yeah, so I guess they did not go bankrupt. That was the prediction of most people, was that they would go bankrupt because they couldn't afford, but they also lost a lot of employees. So that's, if they had kept their same number of employees and been paying that, they would not be able to make ends meet right now. Okay. That's interesting. I thought the company had gone bankrupt immediately, but apparently they just were a lot of people were just leaving in mass. All right, sorry for that side tangent. Okay, last 2 points here. Man, it's already 9:35, 36. So I mean, it's odd but that's something that he could do because of his particular industry, where it is based on sales. Again, similar to Mandragon or Mandragora or whatever the name, Mandragon, or however you pronounce the name of that particular company. He's dealing in an industry that is already massive financially, dealing with credit card payment processing, and not a whole lot of employees in that company total. From what I saw, there's only 120 people total, not 120,000. A McDonald's franchise could not do the same. Even if they are doing a lot of business and making, millions a year, they could not do a similar payment scheme and remain solvent. There are particular industries where that is possible, like investment banking. That's something they could do. They could pay all their employees, even the minimum, even the lowest level employee. They could pay them 70,000 and still remain solvent. But that's because they're dealing with, billions of dollars in profits a year, sort of thing. But a lot of restaurants, a lot of factories, a lot of businesses, they have a very small profit margin, and maintaining that profit margin would be completely non-existent if they tried to raise their employees' salary in the same manner. Okay, let me Okay, so here's another. You are horrified by are intending to do away with private property. But in your existing society, private property is already done away with for 9/10 of the population. That's where I was like, no. not even remotely. It's only the case when they continually use the term private property only to describe factories. And Marx, in this entire document, is specifically talking about factories and nothing else. He continually keeps talking about factories as if those are the only types of businesses. Factories, I mean, possibly they were the biggest industry in his days. Factories are not the norm in current society, and they were not the norm within Marx's lifetime. Banks easily became a much larger industry. There's also transportation as the railway system started to take off. There's also oil, which came, I mean, that was within his lifetime where that became this massive industry. So you've got transportation, oil, and banking outsurpassed everything that factories had been producing during the upstart of the Industrial Revolution. Those industries took off and became kind of dominant, and with the exception of transportation, they're still kind of like the dominant industries of most modernized societies. But the idea that factories are the only type of private property is anything an individual owns. They keep acting as if there's a separation between this private property and personal property. But there is no separation, because even in that example we just went to, kind of as a side tangent, he's renting out his own home. That's using private property, or personal property, as private property. Based on Marx's description of what private property is. He's using his personal assets to generate capital. There's this, in the Marxist idea, or the Marxist viewpoint, there's this distinction between personal private property and private property. But for everybody else in capitalist economists, personal property and private property are indistinguishable, and you can go from one to the other. You can use personal property as Marxist private property, or you can use private property as personal property. That's why they use the terms interchangeably, because it's not like this is private property and that's all it will ever be till the end of time. It's like, no, you can have an entire factory and be like, you know what? This factory's not actually making very much money. Actually, we're going to close this down, and we're going to convert it into a living space for me and my family, and I'm just going to live here. That kind of happens. There's a train station that is converted into a restaurant. That's that people are living in. And what was that? The place where what was that? It used to be I don't think it was used to be like so the thing where we went to for the wedding, that used to be some kind of business, and they had converted it into a house, and then they rent out the property because it's very nice and scenic for things like wedding ceremonies and stuff like that. But the people live there. It's their house.
It's kind of like a bed and breakfast, but
yeah, kind of like a bed and breakfast. But that was originally completely private property, and then they converted it to personal property, and then they kind of made it a hybrid of both personal property and private property in the private property in the Marxist sense. So now, like, what would Marx describe that as? He's like, oh, well, they can't do that. That's got to be owned by the people. Absolute nonsense. And as far as I know, there actually are no laborers, because as far as they're just providing, like, hey, you can use ours to take photos because it's very nice and scenic. There's no work, I guess, outside of keeping the grounds and stuff like that. But there's for the Marxists and communists, there's this clear distinction between the two. It's like, oh, well, no, we would never take that. That's your personal property. It's like, well, what if I decide to rent out a room in my house? That's it. If my house is my personal property, but I want to say, hey, you can stay in my room, but I'm going to charge you rent, then it becomes private property, and then you can confiscate it from me. To those people, they're like, oh, no, that's completely different. I'm like, how is it any different? If I've got a house and I'm living there and I start renting out rooms, and then eventually I move out of that house into somewhere else, and I do nothing but exclusively rent the entire property, it has become exclusively private property, something that you would want to confiscate from me. And when I was talking with McDonald, that was the example I brought up. Is like, if I go into my garage and I start making chairs, and I make so many chairs, and I've got so much demand for chairs, I start hiring somebody to help me making chairs, and then eventually my garage has converted from my personal property to a hybrid of personal and private, and it's become completely private property according to your definition. So could you confiscate my garage from me? Because that has become the means of production. Yeah, he didn't. I don't think he ever gave me a response for that. I don't remember his response. I don't think he had a very good rebuttal.
No, because I think from a socialist or Marxist perspective, that's that gray area where it's not an industry, it's not a corporation, it's not a.
Well, that's how all the corporations started, and even by Marx's own acknowledgement, that's what happens: is the the petty bourgeoisie, or the petty artisan becomes the bourgeoisie in that same process. But he just completely ignores. Oh, that middle section, no, it doesn't exist. No, not there. It's all going extinct, and so we don't have to worry about that. So this idea that private property is already done away with for 9/10 of the population, that's just a bold-faced lie.
Yeah,
even in his own time, even going by his strict definition of what private property is, even within his own lifetime, there were emerging industries that were not even possible in previous years, of people who were formerly the proletariat, who started new industries and became the bourgeoisie. And hey, they used to own no private property, now own private property.
The more technologically advanced we become, the less necessity for massive corporations are needed.
Yeah.
So if you look at the music industry,
Mm-hmm.
you had to go through some sort of producer. You had to go through a recording label, because they're the only ones that would give you airtime on the radio. They're the only ones that could promote your album and get you heard. Otherwise, you're just a guy playing at, bars or on the street, and you're not going to make very much money. So if you want to be successful, you had to do that. Now, because of modern tools and the internet, we've got famous YouTube people popping up all over.
Yep, Spotify and SoundCloud. And Post Malone was discovered through SoundCloud, and I don't know if he got a record deal or if he just started making music with people.
There's a lot of independent artists that have their own albums, and they are their own producers.
Yeah, so that's I'm glad you brought that up. Maybe we'll just cut it here because it's already 9:46. All right, let me get this last sentence out of the way before we go completely into that. But that was a brilliant segue. But so this last sentence is, in one word, you reproach us with intending to do away with your property. Precisely so. That is just what we intend. And I'm like, this right there, even in the context of this passage, because like I was saying, he does contradict himself, because he says, at first he was saying, oh no, we're not trying to get rid of that property, we're not trying to get, it's like, oh, so you're just reproaching us for trying to take away your property. Well, yeah, we are. And I'm like, but then why did you spend so long trying to explain that, oh no, we're not interested in that property, we're not interested, and I'm like, but this right here, so there's the underlying sentence of, even if you are part of the petty artisan or the petty bourgeoisie, that, oh, well, you don't matter because your property's disappearing anyway. That was his original claim, and now he's like, yeah, but even if you had property, yep, we're going to take it all away anyway. That's our goal. And right here, this is kind of like I totally agree with you, but this right here, this sentiment that he provides here, undermines everything he previously had said in this section. You reproach us for intending to do away with your property, but yeah, that is what we intend. Precisely so, that is what we intend. So he's saying we only want to take away the bourgeoisie's property, but if the petty bourgeoisie had property too, we'd take that. That's...
Yeah, well, further down, continuing the paragraph, he's explaining that, yes, that's precisely so. That's exactly what we intend. From the moment when labor can no longer be converted into capital, money, or rent into a social power capable of being monopolized, i.e., from the moment when individual property can no longer be transformed into bourgeoisie property, into capital, from that moment, you say individuality vanishes. I'll skip this paragraph. Doesn't actually add anything. Communism deprives no man of the power to appropriate the products of society. All that it does is deprive him of the power to subjugate the labor of others by means of such appropriation. So what he is saying is their goal is to eliminate property and the fact no one will need it anymore because you can't subjugate anybody to work under you.
Yeah.
Everyone will simply work to provide products that everyone has access to. And in that means there is no necessity for property. If no matter where you go or what you do, everything's already taken care of, then there is no need to have private.
Yeah, that's their idealistic version of it. But the
Correct.
Problem is that means that you can't own property.
Correct.
This is the same thing. We get into this argument with Marxists all the time as the question, well, what if I want to own property? It's like, oh, well, why would you want to own property? I'm like, because I want to own property because I feel like you guys are misusing it. This is try to bring up the tragedy of the commons is like, yeah, when something becomes commonly owned, it tends to be abused and it tends to disappear. So the way you eliminate that is by having private property. So
ultimately, he's saying that by the abolition of private property, or basically businesses, corporations, factories, entities, those can no longer be privately owned. That's going to decrease or basically eliminate the bourgeoisie to where everyone just works. He also mentions, and I don't know if that was a little further on, that will basically do away with the concept of exchange and trade. I think it was a page before.
Yeah. Well, no, it would be as the
selling
page
and
after.
buying disappears, free selling and buying disappears also. And to talk about free selling and buying and all other brave words or bourgeoisie about our freedom in general have a meaning, if any, only in contrast with restricted selling and buying with the fettered traders of the Middle Ages, but have no meaning when opposed to the communistic abolition of buying and selling. They want to essentially get rid of money.
So
instead, items are simply created to be used by society, and then you take what you need.
So here's my problem with all of that, is if that was his purpose to begin with, why didn't he start with that? Why did he bother, or why did they bother trying to explain, oh, no, we're just talking about the bourgeoisie getting rid of their property and all that. And we're like, we're not talking about the petty artisan and all that. They're losing their property anyway, so we're just trying to stop the bourgeoisie. And I was like, okay, but then you said, oh, but yeah, we are trying to get rid of all your property. We're coming to take all your property. Private property will be abolished. And then he goes on to explain, oh, but you won't need it and all of that sort. It's like, then why didn't you start with that? You just wasted these 2 pages previously talking about how you wouldn't. No, don't worry. You can keep your stuff. You can keep your stuff. Oh no, you can't keep your stuff, and you won't need to keep your stuff. It'll all be available for free for everyone. And it's like, why didn't you start with that? The whole build up to this was trying to justify something. It's like he is shifting the goalpost in the middle of this, right? He went from saying, oh, no, we're not going to take all your property. Okay, we are going to take your property, but you won't need it. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute.
Well, I think what he's trying to do is he already understands if you just came out with the end goal of communism, and said, this is what we want. Anybody used to current capitalism or free trade society is going to say, nope, not ever going to happen. That's BS.
Yeah.
But he starts off small and says, let's just gradually keep shifting things this way. Put a frog in water and just slowly turn up the heat until it starts to boil and the frog won't know any difference. It'll sit there and cook because it's slowly changing. It's too slow so I think that's the approach he's trying to take, which is why he's not going to start off with it. He's just trying to say, well, let's just start off with the basic. And if you follow that logically, it leads to this. If you follow that, it leads to this. And it leads to this, and it leads to that. So towards the end of this second section, things just start getting really absurd.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we didn't get through much of it, and you did bring up a brilliant segue into the thing I want to close on, and I kind of derailed that. But yes, so the music industry right now, he talked about getting rid of the artisans, and he was lamenting the abolishment of I guess he talked about lawyers and doctors disappearing and becoming factory workers, and that was kind of how everything was going to go, and we're going to lose, all of these noble professions. And yet now we have more of those than ever before. We've got more doctors, more lawyers, and more musicians. And so this is something I found after the stream last week. It was in my recommended videos on YouTube. I know YouTube recommended videos is usually they recommend boring stuff that you don't actually care, but every once in a while they get things right. And they recommended this artist to me, and I have been just hooked on this song. So I'm going to play this. It is absolutely amazing.
Come on in and listen close. I will tell you how this goes. Light a match and watch it glow. But when it hurts, just let it go. Funny how we meet again. Talking small is just for show. So I will ask you where you've been. I don't really care though. 'Cause I knew in time you would return. 'Cause I felt the crash, but you're feeling the burn. And I know it's time, I know it's time that you feel the burn, that you feel the burn. Come on in and listen close. You fucked up and let me go. Sorry, but that's just a word. Apologies will not be heard. Say you wanna take me back, but never thinking about the fact I'm already moving on. So now it's my turn to be gone. 'Cause I knew in time you would return. 'Cause I felt the crash, but you're feeling the burn. And I know it's time, I know it's time that you feel the burn, that you feel the burn.
Yeah, so that is freaking awesome. So playing all the instruments herself, live looping the whole thing, and she does that in her performances as well at concert venues and stuff like that. So it's not like there's a lot of people in the comments that are like, oh, it's all she's not really doing that, it's faked, and like no, she does that in real life. There's video recordings of her doing it like at bars and stuff like that. That's legitimate. And so that wasn't the first video that I saw from her. The first video I saw from her was the Foo Fighters one, where she's playing Everlong, at least the music to Everlong, but singing the lyrics to another song that I can't remember at the moment. But yeah, she does a lot of that really cool stuff. And that's the artisan that Marx predicted would go away. And yeah, that's amazing stuff. She started off as a drummer, and she's got videos of just her drumming. It's fantastic stuff. And she was signed on to a label, and before the release of her first album, she had a disagreement with her label, left the label, and has been independent, released her own albums by herself, and has been making money off of touring, Spotify, and things like that. So I was like, yeah, that is the way musicians are going from here on out. Same thing with Adelita's Way. Same thing. They were signed on with a business label. Business label had a disagreement with them, dropped the label, became completely independent, and they make all their money off of concerts and off of Spotify and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just music industry, software industry is starting to become more independent. Indie game developers have risen up quite a bit in the last few years. I mean, Minecraft was an indie development company, and they are one of the most well-known, most profitable games ever.
Yeah, the guy became a millionaire off of that. Same thing with the guy who created Braid, single man operation, or Braid?
Brain?
No,
Braid?
What was the name of that? Was the name of that game Braid, where with the time stopping and the time manipulation, where you can rewind?
Big head.
Yeah. Is that
I
called Braid?
Oh yeah, maybe it was Braid. That sounds right.
Yeah, Jonathan Blow, right?
Yeah, Braid.
Yeah. One guy made that independently, became multimillionaire off of it.
Stardew Valley, another example that's come out in the last 2 years, did really well. Single developer. As tools increase and their availability and
the guy who made Undertale, that was
quality of what you can get off of it, people are going to be able to start doing independent projects that 20 years ago would have taken an entire team.
Oh yeah, and we're also seeing that
would have
same thing with film and documentaries right now.
Yeah.
What used to take an entire crew of people are doing now with their GoPros and just off their cell phones, and there are individual people with a camera phone that are competing against news organizations.
And they're doing fairly well.
Yeah, multi-million-dollar news industry. Guy on his cell phone versus guy with the cell phone. A guy on his cell phone is winning. Or like Mark Dice, guy on his laptop who makes videos in his kitchen. He is seeing the same kind of numbers of viewers as CNN.
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
So that's the future that Karl Marx had not envisioned when he was coming up with all of this.
Yeah, and then you got Mr. Beast and PewDiePie, and
yeah. Just let technology build. Let people build their companies. Let people work. Things get better. And then those who are innovative, those who produce, those who can see how to use the tools around them, we're going to see a lot of independent people just coming out and being able to make money and succeed.
Oh yeah, and I think I overlooked the biggest one in most recent memory, Zuckerberg. One guy created a platform, boom, billionaire.
Yeah. So it's no longer this inherited bourgeoisie. You buy yourself a factory.
Yeah.
Sure, we've got plenty of factories. We've got plenty of CEOs. We got plenty of general laborers. But we live in a day and age, and it has been so, gradually getting easier and easier to be an entrepreneur.
Oh, and I played the video, and I did not mention her name. That is Elise Trow, and the song is called "Burn." Really good song. I must have listened to that song like over 200 times by now. I am somewhat obsessed with it. I just leave it on loop or on repeat while at work and just let it loop through over. I get that way with songs sometimes. The last song I had that was kind of like that was The Cab, Temporary Bliss, and I just leave it playing. I must have heard that song like 300 times. So I mean, man, when a song hits you just right, it's like, oh, you can't get enough of it. It's the perpetual earworm. And for me, that means I just listen to it on repeat. And yep, but that song is fantastic, and I want to hear more stuff from her. I hope she's coming out with another album soonish. And she's a real young. She's like 20 or 21, so she's got a big career ahead of her. And I think that's all I got to say for this week. And man, it's already 2.5 hours on this stream. Eesh.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with that.
Yeah, didn't get very far through the second half, so this is probably, instead of being a 3-part like I anticipated, it's probably gonna end up being like a 5-part stream. All right, especially if we're only going through like 2 pages a stream. All right.
Yeah.
It's not a very big document, but going too many side tangents. Try to be more focused next week. Thanks to anybody who ended up joining me. I was having technical difficulties on Monday, so I didn't do it on Monday, but I will try to live stream again next Monday. Thanks to anybody who ends up watching this. I'll see you next time.